Good morning, everyone. I'm Joaquin Esquivel, Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board, and I think we can begin to try together. I'll wait here for my fellow board colleagues to come on camera. Good morning again. My name is Joaquin Esquivel. I'm Chair of the State Water Resources Control Board. Today is Tuesday, July 6th. It is 9 a.m. and I would like to call this meeting to order. I'll begin by introducing my fellow board colleagues. With me today is Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Board Member Sean McGuire, Board Member Laurel Firestone, and I'd like to welcome our newest board member, Nicole Morgan. As many of you may know, Nicole was recently appointed to the state board, and I'd like to just welcome her today to her first board meeting, and also thank outgoing board member Tam Dodek for her incredible 16 years of service on this board. I'll make some additional remarks during board member reports, but I just really wanted to acknowledge and welcome Nicole to her first meeting here. Additionally, joining us is our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, our Chief Counsel, Mr. Michael Loffer. Actually, Mr. Loffer is not here today with us, and instead we have our two Chief Deputies, Mr. Eric Oppenheimer and Jonathan Bishop. We also have our Clerk of the Board, Janine Townsend, and assisting her today is Courtney Tyler and Margie Argel. As you can see, this board meeting is being webcast and recorded in order to comply with distancing standards that are still in the building. We don't have our physical meeting room. We're not meeting physically. We are still here on the Zoom virtual platform. If you are intending to comment on any of today's items, you should be here on the platform with us. There are instructions at the top of today's agenda in order to get here on the Zoom platform. You may be viewing us otherwise customarily through our web cast on the Cali PA website or on the YouTube Live website. If you need to get onto the Zoom platform, please either follow the instructions at the top of today's agenda, or you can email our clerk of the board at commentletters@waterboards.ca.gov, and the clerk of the board can help you get onto the platform. Until your time to actually comment on an item, you will remain muted and your video will be off. And when you do come up to speak on your item, please do state your name and affiliation if you have one clearly. With that, I think we can move on to our public forum. Again, public forum is something we do here at the beginning of our board meetings and allows those wishing to comment on any item not pending before the board to do so here before the board meeting. I think we have two public forum commenters and would invite our first commenter, I believe, Mr. Mayor Bill Brand.
Oh, thank you, Chair Esquivel. Can you hear me okay?
We can. Good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Hope everyone had a nice 4th of July. Yeah, I'm the mayor of Redondo Beach, Bill Brand, and I'm calling in opposition to any further extension of the planned retirement date of the AS Redondo Beach Power Plant, which is coming up. I know you're having a hearing in October, but you also don't have ex parte communications. So we really don't have an ability to now have an open conversation with any of the board members. So we're going to be appearing under this public forum as we move forward. As I said, I'm calling in opposition to any further extension of the AS Redondo Beach Power Plant. The PUC, CAISO, CEC, all these agencies charged with meeting the retirement date that this board set 11 years ago. So they've all known for 11 years that the retirement of all 4 power plants that you extended last year was looming. Now you extended all 4 of them last year and Redondo only 1 year. So we're hoping you stick to that 1 year. It's been very costly to us. We've had a lot of upset conditions this summer. The pressure relief valves blow off. This plant is 67 years old. So you just have to ask yourself fundamentally, is the grid, the entire system grid in California, relying on a 67-year-old power plant in the most densely populated area on the coast of California? I mean, really, it just doesn't pass the smell test. Last year, we were assured that we were not going to lose a grant from the California Natural Resources Agency. Your staff apparently talked to the California Natural Resources Agency. We have been awarded a $4.8 million grant to purchase some of this site. We had an agreement with the new owner to purchase half of it, 25 acres for $2 million, a written agreement. And when these extensions reared their ugly head, well, guess what? the new owner withdrew his offer and we lost our grant. 4 months later, we got a letter from the California Natural Resources Agency that we had lost our $4.8 million grant because of these extensions. And that really undermined years of work we had done. We had worked with the county, former EIFD, State Senator Ben Allen, State Assembly Member Al Succi, myself, the Coastal Conservancy, the Wildlife Conservation Board. Everybody was all lined up to engage in this. And because of this extension, it undermined all our efforts that had taken years to get there and get, a passage on Prop 68, get Prop 68 passed, win the award through a very competitive process. And that was all undermined. And we were assured we weren't going to lose that money. We not only lost the money, we lost the momentum. So if this goes on much longer, it's really going to be very difficult. Take years more. So it's time to put an end to that. It's 67 years old. You guys have extended 4 plants for a year, 3 plants for another 3 years. It's really time for you guys to say enough is enough. You had these retirement dates for 11 years, and we're not giving you Redondo anymore. So anyway, thanks for the time. Welcome to a new board member. I think it was Morgan. I didn't realize Tam Dudak was retiring. I've been doing this a very long time. I started this in 2007 with a hearing before the Water Board. It wasn't a hearing, actually. It was a discussion at UC Davis in 2008, I believe. So I've been doing this a long time. And PUC, CAISO, CEC, they all know this has been coming for a long time. So I hope you guys will stick to that. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate your time this morning, Mayor. Thank you as always. Thank you. Next, we have Emma De La Rosa.
Yes, good morning, everyone. My name is Emma De La Rosa, Policy Advocate with Leadership Council for Justice and Accountability. I am giving this comment on behalf of the residents of Fuller Acres. Fuller Acres is a small rural community in unincorporated Kern County. And Fuller Acres residents are calling for your support to address the water contamination in the Fuller Acres Mutual Water Company, which has been exacerbated by poor governance and attention to the water quality by the company's board members. According to the Safe Drinking Water Information System, sampling conducted in February showed that TCP levels for both of the wells are exceeding the maximum contaminant level, and arsenic is close to exceeding as well, with levels of 8.9 and 8.7. Contamination in the water has been a long-term concern for residents, yet they have received little to no information from their governance on what the next steps would be to address the issue. Residents report color in the water and foul odors while the water is running, and report concerns about using the water for everyday use, including brushing their teeth or showering. Residents also report water shutoffs without prior notifications due to emergency repairs to the system. Residents are left without running water for hours at a time without notice of when it will return. When the water does start running, residents report foul odor, color, and rust coming from faucets. When approaching the board, the Fuller Acres Mutual Water Company board about this issue, board members do not provide a solution or follow-up discussions with residents on how to ensure immediate communications with residents. They simply say that it's an emergency and there's no way to communicate that with folks. And with the water shut-offs occurring almost monthly, residents are concerned about the high risk of the system failing and not having access to water. In addition, residents have expressed concern that not all of the residents are receiving notices from the Fuller Acres Water Mutual Company to inform the community about water sampling and contamination levels. When notices are provided, the notices are not provided in Spanish, which is the language most commonly used in that area. In fact, the Fuller Acres Mutual Water Company board members have expressed reluctance to send notices in Spanish because this is America. Moreover, due to the Fuller Acres Mutual Water Company unwillingness to install water meters in trailer homes or accessory dwelling units, residents report very low water pressure when utilizing multiple faucets, washing clothes, or using water outdoors. Residents who live in the trailer homes report occasions when they're showering and left with little to no water due to the water used in other homes utilizing the same connection. The water pressure, in addition to continuous water shutoffs, have left residents enduring extreme heat waves because their cooling systems rely on water to operate. So now residents are demanding safe drinking water and are calling on the California State Water Resources Control Board to step in to identify solutions to the contamination in the water through the SAFER program. Similar to other water systems who have been identified for this program, the Fuller Acres Water Mutual Company has failed to provide an adequate supply of affordable, safe drinking water, and it has failed to take the adequate steps to supply affordable, safe drinking water. Residents deserve to know the condition of the water system and deserve the proper attention and support from the board to ensure that the community has safe and reliable drinking water. This is in addition to the water quality issues. Residents are facing unjust late fees and do not receive the proper receipts or information on the finances, which we know that as a mutual company, there may be little oversight on the State Water Board. But all of this issue, the poor governance is making the water quality issue an even bigger problem. And community members are tired of it, and they really need the support from the state. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate you flagging the challenges at Fuller Acres. I was just pulling up our needs analysis, and yes, certainly Fuller Acres is there because they are not meeting an MCL here. So thank you. I think at this point, I'll want to hear further from our program staff at SAFER, just where Fuller Acres may be and what is I know a pipeline of projects and engagement in communities that we're creating through that program. So just really appreciate you flagging the community's needs, and just thank you.
Yeah, and I'll just add to that that, you know, on the SAFER website, this is not the responsibility of residents or advocates to figure this out, but there is a, if you go to the SAFER website and the data portion, you can actually look up also where they are in terms of financial assistance and when the oldest violation is or how long they've been in violation. So it looks like 7 years, and that they are receiving technical assistance. So you know, I think this is like the chair said, I think an area where it is squarely in the SAFER program. And so look forward to hearing from staff where things are. And I think just appreciate you bringing this to us.
Yeah, thank you, board member. I believe we may have one further public commenter. Let me just refresh my sheet. Apologies. I don't actually see one. Janine, did you indicate there was one other person?
Yes, it's Mr. Robert Gaddis.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yes, Mr. Gaddis.
There we go. I'm unmuted. Thank you for having me here today. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, being a member of the Water Board is certainly a challenging role, a difficult job. Many different and competing constituencies are constantly advocating for your pending decisions to support actions that benefit them. They are special interests. You, and especially your staff, are pressured, cajoled, sweet-talked, and incentivized by Fortune 500 corporations, state politicians, lobbyists, the press, environmentalist groups, residents, state government organizations, labor unions, utilities, independent systems operators, and other special interests all day, every day. It's tough. Not to pile on, but I'd like to speak for a group that doesn't hire professional lobbyists working with your staff on a daily basis to guide your decisions. I'd like to speak today for a moment on behalf of the school children of Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach who live downwind of the AES Redondo power plant. There are many daily challenges for a child growing up in a neighborhood where the air is filled with poison and particulate. Doesn't make life easier, even if you don't realize it every day. Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach children may notice that their parents wipe down the furniture, windows, and floors frequently to remove that sticky, dark substance before it rubs off on anyone's clothes. They may notice that the air smells like car exhaust or automobile brake fluid in the morning. The large burn-offs tend to be overnight, so nobody sees the smoke, but you sure smell it in the morning. You hear the blasts of the release valves shaking the windows and scaring the pets. You see the clouds descend from the smokestacks that fog the neighborhood during an inversion. But as a child, you don't realize what is actually going on. What's really going on is far more sinister for the thousands of children breathing the Redondo Beach AES power plant exhaust every day. Over 4,700 of these children are in schools about 1/2 mile downwind from the plant's smokestacks, schools situated at the same height as the top of the smokestacks. These kids and their families breathe hundreds of tons of carbon monoxide, tons of ammonia and particulate matter formaldehyde, acetaldehyde, acrolein, benzene, ethylbenzene, hexane, toluene, xylenes, naphthalene, et cetera, et cetera. This 60-year-old technology, broken down an unreliable power plant, not only blights their neighborhood, consumes millions of gallons of ocean water, killing sea life, but it poisons them too. And it costs the ratepayers tens of millions to keep open when it cannot be even relied upon to serve a purpose. Some special interests seem to have a method of getting their way, in spite of the health degradation and environmental damage to some of the most vulnerable of California residents, those who cannot hire lobbyists. A Fortune 500 fossil fuel energy company making billions constructing and running coal-fired power plants in Asia can afford to spend millions on lawyers, lobbyists, engineers, et cetera, to curry favor with your staff. The children of Redondo Beach and Hermosa Beach cannot. This needs to be considered in your decision. This decision pits grid mismanagement against big money, looting interests to the detriment of the health of our kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gaddis. I appreciate your time this morning. And yes, very critical that we balance what are many different voices, and will acknowledge and very much understand that oftentimes communities don't have the same resources that other stakeholders may have, but all of those voices are valid and always left for us to, yes, be sure we're balancing. So I appreciate the reminder and your comments this morning. So thank you. With that, I believe that finishes our public forum. And so I appreciate folks who have taken the time to come and address the board this morning. Next, we'll quickly go to our first item, which is just the adoption of and consideration of adoption of the board meeting minutes from the June 15th board meeting. And I'll entertain a motion if there aren't any edits or comment from board members.
I'll move to adopt.
Second.
Thanks. Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote?
Yes. Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Abstain.
Thank you. Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
And Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. And it carries, and the board meeting minutes are adopted. Thank you. Next, we'll get into our informational items. And our first is our drought update here. As we've put on the calendar, just a regular opportunity to check in, understand how conditions are continuing to evolve. And I'll kick it over first to our Executive Director, Eileen Sobek, but just want to welcome Director Carla Namath and Regional Director Ernest Conant from the Department of Water Resources and the Bureau of Reclamation, Federal Bureau of Reclamation, respectively. Ms. Sobek.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. We do have staff from our Division of Drinking Water and also our Division of Water Rights to answer any questions. We have just a very short staff update, nothing on the drinking water side. We're continuing to work with the communities we've identified before to help them with their solutions to drinking water issues. On the water rights side, on the Russian River, as you know, we have the board did approve an emergency regulation. That regulation, curtailments pursuant to that regulation have not been triggered yet. Individual water users have been managing to manage their use without triggering the regulation up till now. We do think that as we get towards the end of July and beginning of August, the regulation will go into effect. There was a public workshop last Thursday regarding possible curtailments and issues pertaining to low water supply up in the Scott and Shasta watersheds. There was a wide range of participants. Some of our board members were there and heard the discussion. So we really welcome that public input, and we'll be taking that into account as we come up with a staff recommendation for future action for the board. And so with that, I do want to turn it over to Director Namath and to Mr. Conant to update you all on operations of the state and federal water projects, especially with respect to some of their storage goals and temperature management actions. And so back to you, Chair Escobar.
Thank you, Executive Director Sobek. I'll just kick it over to Director Namath or Conant, whichever would like to be able to take things first. And I just want to, again, thank you for taking the time and coming to address the board and helping us to continue to understand how conditions are evolving and the seriousness of the circumstances we find. So just thank you. Appreciate you being here this morning.
Certainly. Regional Director Conan, I think maybe I'll go first and lay out where we are with the two projects, and then you can fill in on aspects specific to the Central Valley project. Good morning, Chair Esquivel and members of the board. I feel fortunate to engage directly with all of you in a dialogue about what's happening this year hydrologically and the operations of the state and federal water projects as a result of that. But I wouldn't say I'm happy to be here, but it is our reality, and it's going to be our reality moving forward. And so I wanted to just give an overview as to where we are relative to the operations of the project and the temporary urgency change order that we received from the board, which I'm thankful for the partnership with the state board and the board staff and helping us move through how to manage among important water quality needs in the Delta and in the tributaries and reservoir storage for temperature management and for carryover into next year. So I thought I would start with kind of a sort of a quick recap of how the projects have been managing since the middle of April, when we saw a pretty drastic reduction in inflows into the primary reservoirs of the state and federal projects, and some real challenges with an increase in depletions in the system. So as you may be aware, starting in the beginning of May, given those conditions, we started estimating about a loss in about 650,000 acre feet in Shasta, Oroville, and Folsom. Starting in the beginning of May, the projects essentially increased releases from New Melones. That was the Bureau of Reclamation, and we got back into compliance with water quality conditions in the Delta. We ultimately sought a temporary urgency change order from the board to begin June 1st, because we were anticipating otherwise being out of compliance with current water quality regulatory standards in the Delta. That enabled us to throttle back on the releases from Folsom, Oroville, and Shasta, give us an opportunity to put in the emergency salinity barriers in the Delta. Those were constructed and have been operational since July 1st. What we have continued to see over the month of June, I think the limited inflows into the reservoirs has stabilized. Ultimately, we're in about the 700,000 acre foot range in terms of inflows that did not materialize as a result of this year's unique and extreme hydrology. We continue to see depletions on the rise in the month of June. And that puts more pressure on reservoirs to make those releases to even maintain the water quality standards that had been adjusted under the temporary urgency change order. So the year continues to be a challenge. A primary driver of that was king tides, which had the reservoirs releasing more than originally anticipated, but we continue to monitor as we move forward, both the depletions as we understand them, and monitor our progress towards end of year storage targets for the 3 primary reservoirs. I think Regional Director Conant can say a little bit more about New Melones and its contributions to the system this year, which has been unique. But we are continuing to see a tightening of the system. I would say with a degree of, while the inflows have stabilized because we're really past the snowmelt part of our season, I think there are 2 kind of primary uncertainties as we continue to move through the summer. One is the uncertainty around the performance of the salinity barriers in the Delta and exactly how much they enable us to carry over in our reservoirs, which is an uncertainty that we experienced in 2014 and 2015. It's still the case. We're still monitoring that. And then I think ongoing uncertainties in the rate of depletions within the system. So that's, non-project water that's being diverted in the tributaries that affects the ability of the releases from the reservoirs to maintain water quality conditions down in the Delta, even with the regulatory relief that's been provided by the board. So all of it means this continues to be a very challenging year. A couple of things coming up. One, we do have as a requirement of our California Endangered Species Act permit, a drought operations plan. We do plan to complete that and post that publicly as we do on a monthly time step, hopefully by the end of this week. We are continuing to nail down some of our end of year storage, our progress towards those end of year storage targets, but also a better understanding of the depletion rate. So that will be something coming towards the end of the week. I think you will also see some increased conservation messaging coming from the State Water Project to our contractors this year in anticipation of next year as we hone in on pretty low end of year storage and an understanding of what it's going to take potentially to have a water supply allocation from the State Water Project next year. So you will see some ramped up conservation messaging from the Department of Water Resources to its state water contractors to help reinforce what a challenging year this is going to be this year, but also next year. And then I think lastly, I think there has been some conversation about subsequent temporary urgency change petition coming from the projects for maybe later in the summer and into the fall. I think at this point in time, we want to make sure that we better understand and are on a good path to meeting the obligations in our current temporary urgency change order before we come to the board with something else. But I would also note the board's ongoing desire that's been communicated to DWR and Reclamation to have as much public process around any kind of subsequent temporary urgency change petition that we might submit to the board. So we're working to balance all of those pieces. It's for that reason that I thought it was important that you hear from me directly this month as part of this informational item. So with that, maybe I'll hand it over to Regional Director Conant to fill in and then take any questions from the board. So again, thank you for the opportunity to be here this morning.
Yeah, thank you, Carla, and good morning, Chair and board members. As Carla said, we have some very difficult situation in front of us in this unique water supply year. Just to supplement a little bit of what Carla reported from the CVP perspective, our overall strategy this year from a CVP perspective has been working closely with DWR. It's very much a balancing act. And some of those key goals are to, keep minimum carryover at Folsom. So in an event that this is a dry winter, so that we meet minimum health and safety requirements for a number of people in the Sacramento area dependent on Folsom. To maintain storage at Shasta, to have some carryover for next year, and to assist with cold water management for the benefit of salmon, and to meet Delta water quality standards, just to name a few of the primary objectives. I think, as I've mentioned to the board before, and as Carla alluded to a moment ago with respect to one, we've taken some extraordinary steps with the CVP this year to take some actions that we've not done before in previous droughts. The first was a power bypass at Shasta to preserve additional cold water. As a result of that action, it cost the power contractors millions of dollars, but we were able to save about 300,000 acre feet of cold water for the benefit of salmon. And notwithstanding that effort, we have a very difficult year at Shasta, as you all know. In addition, as Carla alluded to, we have made releases from new Maloney's for outflow requirements, and that has benefited the overall system, both projects, in order to help meet outflow requirements and thereby preserve storage in the 3 major reservoirs. So those are just a few additional notes in addition to what Carla has outlined. And I would just also note that, we support the board's process for emergency curtailments during the circumstances where water is unavailable, as indicated by the hydraulic data. And I know that's something you're going to be considering in the future, but just wanted to signal our support and appreciation for your efforts and the efforts of your staff in pursuing that activity. So I think we're open to any questions the board members may have.
Yeah, thank you both. And we meant to mention our curtailment activities. We did send out notices of unavailability. We've held workshops on the methodology and continue to have discussion as to how best the board can proceed through emergency curtailment regs here in a way that provides appropriate opportunity and discussion, but knowing that time is of essence here, that we need to try to move quickly. Appreciate the support and the flag. This year continues to be a challenge we're hearing, and I'm very concerned still about where we will be left here at the end of this water year and the challenges we'll continue to see these next couple of months. But my mind also goes to next year, and in a way that I know it has for the project operators here as well, and I think for much of us in the state, with the reality that if we have another dry year, another dry winter here, we will be having incredible challenges here in the state and a number of the watersheds that we're working in. I think of the Russian, but certainly I think of how the projects will be managed then. So I'm just wondering if you might be able to kind of highlight or discuss some of the ways that you as the project operators are starting to already prepare for what may be the difficulty of another dry winter, knowing that as I think we continue to kind of have a mantra around, it's as wet as it's going to be now. And we have as many options now as we do. And as we continue to go through these dry conditions, things become more and more difficult and less the sort of options or time to think of the options that we may have. So just wondering, again, if you might be able to either Director Namath or Regional Director Conant have any sort of thoughts on what are the activities that folks can be anticipating? How can we be understanding of, again, the preparedness that I think we all know we need to have going into the possibility of another dry year?
Yeah, thank you for that that question, Chair Esquivel, and it is very much not just on my mind, but now part of the State Water Project's kind of sort of preliminary workflow. So some of the things that we are taking a look at. So one, I would say, as I think you are aware, our 5% allocation for most of our contractors south of the Delta has been met through stored supplies in San Luis Reservoir. And some of the, I think we're doing about 300 CFS cubic feet per second pumping for our South Bay Aqueduct contractors right now. And we are certainly talking with them about the growing need to conserve this summer. And then for our South of Delta contractors that had the supplies from San Luis, starting to speak with them about their need to conserve as well, as DWR begins to understand what kind of a hydrologic year we would need next year to get to even modest project allocations. So, so we are starting to do that modeling work for the 2022 water year, and with some relatively conservative kinds of numbers. So of course, this year we were dealing in the 99% exceedance. We're starting to look at 99% exceedance, and we're starting to look at an overlay, not just of, you know, the last 82 years of hydrology, but ambient temperature, which of course everyone has seen the charts that go like this in terms of even really the last 10 years in terms of ambient temperature, but also some of the physical characteristics, the soil moisture and other things, to help us understand better what our forecasting could look like. So preliminarily, you know, we're looking at, you know, the potential need for significant hydrology, and, you know, the 130% of normal, you know, relative to runoff to get us to average runoff into Lake Oroville. So those are some pretty difficult numbers to think through. But the important thing is to start the analysis now so that we can share them in advance, not only with the state water contractors, but also with the water board and our colleagues at the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And then certainly some of the water users in the Delta. They played a really important role in the last drought in terms of voluntary curtailments. We've started to have some real preliminary discussions with them. They certainly need to be part of our next year's planning so that we can understand, even with a very modest allocation, it is possible with dry conditions to continue to have this challenge between upstream storage and downstream water quality needs. So all of that would be coming, I think, more towards the end of the summer into the start of the October 1st water year. I think the big takeaway lesson and part of the conversations that we're starting to have with our Feather River settlement contractors is getting far in advance of our typical schedule for allocations. We start in December. We always start very conservatively, but we know with historic low storage at Oroville heading into the next water year, there's some upfront conversations we need to have all along our system, even with our settlement contractors on the Feather, so that we know we can all be operating conservatively. So I think as a general proposition, we're going to see a lot more upfront conversations this fall around the probability of extremely low water allocations. So particularly for our ag customers, we can get ahead of some decisions that they make even in the fall in terms of getting things in their greenhouses in anticipation for the planting season next winter and spring. So That involves also, frankly, a lot of conversations between DWR and our colleagues at the California Department of Food and Agriculture. So we can really see how the seasonality of a lot of the decisions that we make, not just water allocations, but planting decision is shifting given the extreme hydrology. So I'll stop there, but a lot more to come on those topics.
Yeah, Chairman, just to supplement what Carla mentioned, of course, we're working very closely with DWR in working through forecasts for next year and looking at different scenarios. With respect to forecasting, as Director Namath mentioned, that's an area that we're both looking at closely. I think I've mentioned to the board before that this phenomena we experienced this year, where we lost 700,000 acre feet basically overnight that we were projecting of inflow, is something we've seen throughout the West, particularly in the Klamath Project, the Colorado River system, and the Rio Grande system. Lake Powell alone lost like 1.5 million acre feet that they were projecting about that same time period. So Reclamation is having a West-wide forum this fall of all the forecasters, including our state partners like DWR, to take a second look at just how we're approaching forecasting. Again, also working with other agencies, NRCS and the Weather Bureau and others, along with our state partners that are all involved in this forecasting effort. Again, if we have better forecasting, that can help us inform our contractors, as Carla mentioned, to maybe make different decisions than they otherwise would have, as compared to this situation we found ourselves this year. In terms of just adding to what Carla mentioned, of course, there would be additional discussion on temporary barriers. And with respect to Folsom, again, our key objective there is to ensure that we maintain public health and safety water. And, we have contingency plans, as we did in 2015, to deploy barges if ever needed in order to keep the water flowing, as it were, if the water level ever got below the intakes to the distribution systems that feed the communities out of Folsom. So those are just a couple of things that we're looking at in addition to what Carla mentioned.
Thank you both. I appreciate those flags and the timeline of the later this summer coming into early fall, already really being able to start discussions in preparation of in case and if we continue to have dry conditions in the winter. I just really do appreciate that. And particularly, what comes to mind is that we're not being provided much certainty here by Mother Nature. But we, through our tools, these 21st century tools, better modeling and understanding of what's actually happening in this climate crisis as this drought unfolds, can help at least lend some certainty, at least to decisions for folks in agriculture, in other sectors, to at least better be prepared and understand what to expect, and not put off decision making too late in the growing season, where it becomes a real challenge to try to shift course and to respond to what may be, again, continued dry conditions. So just thank you both. Really appreciate that response and continued eye toward being better prepared and having better options by bringing conversations earlier into the water year. Board members, questions for the directors here?
I'll ask a question. Or maybe it's, well, first of all, just want to say thank you so much for coming and for all of your efforts to manage in this really, really bad year. And just want to reiterate how appreciative I am of, all that I heard today around, and that Chair Escobar highlighted around just rethinking forecasting and planning to this new reality. We can't have optimistic forecasting anymore, sadly. And we're definitely in this new reality. So many uncertainties, but need to be, rethinking the regime that we use. And I just really appreciate how you all are are looking at bringing things earlier. Both, I guess I would just want to highlight, you know, we at the Water Board are in a really difficult position in that, you know, we're at the end of the day, we're responsible for balancing all these different needs. We have to, that's unfortunately the role that we're in. We're the ones that have to, you know, consult with you all, understand all of these really complex and severe challenge, sort of trade-offs that have to go on within the constraints of how you all are operating, so that we can approve things like TUCPs, temperature management plans, and, you know, do our job of administering the water rights system, protecting water quality, helping to protect public health and safety, public trust. And so, you know, I think I guess my hope is from as you all are working through this fall and early in the next year, that we can together figure out how we can prevent situations like we're in this year, when even with all of our best efforts, it's tough to even meet the frameworks that we're having to set and approve to make those balancing decisions. You know, just avoid, I think, the frustrating situation for all of us that we're in this year. And, you know, I think I would just also want to say this is really, really severe impacts on all sectors. Nobody is winning here. And I think every sector, whether it's urban water supplies, certainly the rural communities, I know we're looking at through the SAFER program, and agriculture, that we're all, I think, trying to grapple with the same challenge of, we can no longer do things as we have. What worked, you know, even a few years ago isn't working in this new reality. And so I think the investment that, you know, we have this opportunity with this budget cycle to have a lot more investments in infrastructure that might be able to be helpful in hopefully accelerating some of those changes in terms of diversified sources, conservation. I know for small and rural communities, you know, it's just not realistic to have a single source, for example. So, you know, that's a lot of comments. I guess my one question would be, you know, do you all, are there ways that you are looking at, in addition to all the planning and forecasting changes that you all are doing, that you're looking at the opportunity with infrastructure investments to help us prepare again and sort of respond to this new reality?
Well, yeah, thank you for the comment and the question. And the answer is yes. When I, you know, take a step back and I think about, you know, what do we need to be doing? Because I think we all feel and are now working our way through some pretty limited, you know, limited abilities. And the big three in my mind are data, infrastructure, and landscape scale restoration. So data encompasses a lot. It encompasses, you know, data to improve water conservation. It encompasses data to improve water rights administration. You know, it encompasses data to improve our forecasting. Infrastructure also, you know, encompasses a lot. You know, but we do have our own reservoirs that can be operated better. Not only to manage drought, but to manage the other side of climate change, which is flood. And so all the forecast informed reservoir operations, you know, that's going to be hugely important, using our existing infrastructure better, but also, you know, how we move water around, both when it's wet and making sure that all communities are hooked up to enough appropriate sources when it's dry. We really see the role that diversification plays in having a secure and reliable and clean water supply. To your point, And then, in addition to having infrastructure that can provide flows, particularly in the drier years, for threatened and endangered species and other public trust resources, we need to have the infrastructure that, can also do that. We live in a very altered system. And I think what we're seeing right now is just a lot of conflict and a lot of limitations. And we want to be doing better for both. We want to be doing better for both our, environment and watershed, and we want to be doing better for water users in terms of, reliability and predictability, which is going to be different, and that's part of what we need to embrace is, a period of change to get to something that ultimately provides a degree of certainty and stability for our economies as well. So good question. A lot of work to be done. My silver lining on this year is, when you get in these tough times, they really focus you on the imperative for solutions, practical, implementable solutions. So, my goal is to learn a lot, to be transparent about everything that we're learning, because I think that can better focus our investments on where they're needed. And we're fortunate to be in the budget situation we are. So a lot of work to do.
Yeah, thank you, Member Firestone, for the comment and question. And just to echo a little on to Carla's comments, in the infrastructure area, we see several different arenas where infrastructure dollars could be very helpful to us here in California, including assisting with habitat development. There's, hard infrastructure and kind of soft green infrastructure, both of which are needed with some of the habitat projects that are being pursued. And hopefully those could be expedited with additional funds. We have the whole area of storage. We have the California Water Commission pursuing additional storage and several major projects, and Reclamation is also working on those projects and a couple others, and providing some funding, we hope, here in the future. But in addition, the infrastructure funds could be helpful. Again, that's going to be a more long-term process. It's what it takes to improve a reservoir or build a new reservoir, as is being proposed through the California Water Commission. And then, the third area that we can't lose sight of is we have to make sure that what we have works. So in a wet year, we can move adequate water to groundwater storage and to other reservoirs. And that, of course, that brings to mind repair of the Delta Mendota Canal and the California Aqueduct / San Luis Canal, portion of which is jointly owned by the federal government. So those are some areas that I think we would try to focus infrastructure dollars on, which could be very helpful. And we'll be coordinating with the other agencies so that hopefully, Reclamation and the various state agencies can have a common message when the infrastructure bill comes along. We hope. I hope it comes along and provides some real opportunities for us to advance some of these important projects.
Yeah, thank you, board member, and thank you both. Very much reminded as well that these are Western-wide challenges right now when we're talking about drought too, and our sister states throughout the West also needing, and throughout the nation, ultimately, when we talk about our water systems and the impacts from climate change and the need to reinvest in them here now in the 21st century. So thank you, guys. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question. So
Vice Chair, please.
Thank you, Ms. Nemeth, for talking about transparency. And I just keep thinking about how, on the one hand, things seem so much worse than the last drought, but then on the other hand, we just have improved communication, not just interagency communication, but stakeholders at large. And always struggling here where we have our emergency authorities and the need to move quickly, but at the same time looking for opportunities for public process. And so specifically, my question goes to the relationship between temperature management, TUCPs, water quality, and curtailments. And the need, coming up here soon to be looking at curtailments for this year, but then also for next year. And so what can we do to improve communication in the short run, but then also over the long run? Looking specifically at, targeted actions this year, but are there broader actions that we need to put out there on the table, and how can we do so in such a way to get some good stakeholder input, and also working more closely with the projects on the information that we have?
Well, that's a really good question. And I would say, because I do think the board, really does have good public process. And I know it's hard in these, emergency scenarios where time is of the essence. But you know that when you take extraordinary action, it really helps that action to have good interaction with all the stakeholders. If I share, I would say, from my perspective, I think, I know this might not be that satisfying, but I almost think it's more about the messaging, because I think, especially on the curtailment front, it's, I'm, aware of the, the processes that you all are trying to establish. I know they're not going to be perfect. And I think the challenge is helping stakeholders understand that they need to be done. We're, as a state, we're going to get it as good as we can this year, but that we, the department, in the way that we understand depletions, that's going to improve next year. And for us, it's really for, all those, upstream users, it's a commitment to being open to their feedback and open to learning more about this, how the system actually functions, and not getting, sort of overly committed to the process we had to do this year, that, always has to be done in an emergency situation with incomplete information. I mean, that's the reality. We have incomplete information that we are all forced to make decisions around, and these decisions are really important to Californians and people on the ground. And so, part of it is, I think, in how we think about getting through this year is also, establishing the commitment to review and monitor and understand what happens this year and learn from it next year, so that we're building upon a process and we're not getting overly fixed in something that we know can be improved and needs to be improved for it to be useful and acceptable and implementable. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's how I think about these really tough situations I think we all find ourselves in.
Thank you. And I couldn't agree more on messaging and using this as an opportunity to educate the public about the system and how it's not perfect, but how it does work.
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair, for the question. I don't really have much to add. Again, hopefully we're going to learn a lot from this year, and hopefully with improved forecasting in the future, that would enable all of us to collectively more timely make decisions. Obviously, if we knew in April what we know now, we would have all been doing things a little differently.
Yeah, thank you both. I think reminded, as Carla said, that we have imperfect data and ultimately imperfect tools oftentimes to accomplish this work, particularly in emergency fashion. And so it's an opportunity to think what that better system might be. And how do we resource that, and how do we move ourselves in the 21st century when we talk about water rights and its administration? And I think we have an opportunity here. So I thank you both. Any other questions? Well, thank you. I really appreciate both Director Namath and Regional Director here, Conant, personally coming to discuss the challenges that we're seeing here this year and this water year, but also appreciate the good discussion about already preparing for next. And so just thank you for the continued engagement with us here, the sticking with us here with each board meeting, having a quick update, sometimes from Ms. Molly White, sometimes, and Kristen White, sometimes hear from the directors themselves, and really just appreciate that continuity of engagement with us. It's going to continue to pay dividends, I feel, as we manage through difficult times these next months ahead, and as we manage for the potential of a dry winter. And so just thank you.
Likewise, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity.
Really appreciate it. Okay, I think with that, it wraps up our item number 2, and we can transition to our informational item number 3, which is a more general hydrologic update. And, you know, I have to step out just for a moment, and so I will actually hand the gavel over to our Vice Chair, Vice Chair Doreen Diadamo, Didi Diadamo, but we can go ahead and transition to item number 3. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Chair Esquivel. Okay, so I believe we have Stanley Mubako presenting. Good morning.
Yes, good morning, board members. My name is Stanley Mubako. I'm an environmental scientist in the Division of Water Rights, and I'll be presenting today's update on current hydrologic conditions. Next slide, please. The current cumulative precipitation curves have not risen much since mid-March. And we'll start off with the 8-station precipitation index for Northern Sierra. It is at 23.1 inches for the season, which is 46% of average for this date. Next slide, please. This is the 5-station index for San Joaquin. It's at 18.3 inches for the season, which is 47% of average. Next slide, please. The 6-station index for Tulare Basin is the next one. As you can see, it's at 9.6 inches for the season, which is 34% of average for this state. Next slide, please. On this slide, you can see from top to bottom, the Northern, Central, and Southern Sierra snow water content as a percentage of average, and it's shown by the light blue shade area. This year's trend is shown by the dark blue line, and it shows that, you know, the little snow accumulated this water year is now gone. The northern region is at 1%, which is only 5% of average for this state. And both the central and southern Sierra regions are at 0%, which is consistent with prior low snowpack years. Next slide, please. On this slide, we can see an overview of conditions for selected water supply reservoirs. Statewide, most reservoirs are well below historic averages. And except for New Melons, which is relatively in good shape at 79%, other state and federal project reservoir levels are only half of what they've been historically at this time of the year. Shasta is at 47% of average, Oroville at 39%, and Folsom at 36% of average. Next slide, please. Going on to look at other reservoirs, is at July 1st, Chakuma Reservoir, it is at about 56% of capacity and 66% of average. Diamond Valley Lake is at about 81% of capacity, and San Luis Reservoir is at 33% of capacity or 52% of average. Next slide, please. Here we are looking at the TEM 91 condition. The blue line represents delta flows that are available to meet water quality and flow requirements. So when the blue line rises into the upper red area of the plot, Stored water project is needed to maintain delta requirements and in-basin uses. And TEM 91 may be considered at that point. So TEM 91 curtailments, they went into effect on April 29 due to the dry conditions. And letters related to curtailments were dispatched to TEM 91 water right holders. The curtailments will remain in effect until wet weather and or reduced demands result in changes to supplemental water releases. So this graph is being is posted on the Water Rights Division's Bay Delta Program website, and it's being updated weekly. Next slide, please. This is the drought monitor for California as of June 29 of 2021. And as you can see on this slide, the entire state is experiencing at least moderate drought conditions, with more than 3/4 of the state under extreme to exceptional drought conditions. Next slide, please. The Colorado Basin is experiencing at least abnormally dry conditions, with more than 80% of the basin experiencing extreme to exceptional drought, as shown on this slide. Next slide, please. This is an overview of the US seasonal drought outlook, showing drought tendency during the period June 17 to September 30 of 2021. The large-scale trends shown here are based on derived probabilities guided by short and long range statistical and dynamical forecasts. And this particular outlook shows that almost half of the country is experiencing persistent drought conditions on these dates, predominantly the western and northern states. Next slide, please. This slide shows that most of the Colorado River Basin is between 60 to 80% of average precipitation levels. Next slide, please. This is the temperature forecast, and it comes from the Climate Prediction Center. It shows the likelihood that temperatures over the next 8 to 14 days will either be normal, above, or below what would be expected for this time of the year. The outlook is showing higher odds of warmer than normal temperatures for much of the United States, apart from the Southeast, including the whole of California. Next slide, please. So I'll end by looking at the precipitation forecast. As of June 30, the 8 to 14-day outlook is showing a 33% probability of normal precipitation in the southwestern half of California, and a 33 to 40% probability of below normal precipitation in the northeastern half of the state. Of course, as this is the dry season, little to no precipitation would be normal for this time of the year. Thank you very much. At this time, we'll receive questions from the board members, if any.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Well, thank you for that update. We appreciate it. And with that, we will move on to our next item, item number 4, which is the uncontested calendar, and will be taken up and voted on unless there's a request for it to be removed from the uncontested calendar. Would any of the board members like to make a motion?
I'll move to adopt item 4.
I'll second.
Okay. Motion and second. Ms. Townsend, please call the roll.
Certainly. Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Motion carries. Item number 4 is adopted. Next, we'll move on to item number 5. And this item number 5 is consideration of a proposed resolution adopting emergency regs for a fee schedule for wineries specific to the winery order. Good morning, Mr. Ciccarelli.
Good morning. Good morning, Board Chair and fellow board members. My name is David Ciccarelli, and I am the fee branch chief in the Division of Administrative Services. I'm here to present item number 5, which is the consideration of fees for the statewide general order. Assisting me today on this item and who has led the process for developing fees for the statewide general order from day one is Glenn Osterhage, who is also part of the fee and revenue branch in the Division of Administrative Services. Also assisting me today is also Scott Couch, acting assistant deputy director from the Division of Administrative Services. And from the program side and the Division of Water Quality is Brianna St. Pierre, who is the acting chief of the groundwater protection section, and Laurel Wardrop, who is the waste discharge requirement unit chief. On January 20th, 2021, the State Water Board adopted waste discharge requirements for winery process water, better known as the statewide winery general order. The current waste discharge requirement, threat to water quality, and complexity fee schedules could be used to assess fees for dischargers enrolled in the statewide winery general order, and is in fact currently being used to assess fees to some winery dischargers issued individual orders. However, staff determined that developing a fee schedule specific to the winery general order would be more appropriate. Following the adoption of the statewide winery general order in January, staff held stakeholder meetings on March 5th, 15th, and April 28th to discuss potential fees with interested parties. Since many of these potential enrollees are new to the fee development process, staff spent time during these meetings going over the guiding principles staff use to develop fees, as well as the annual budget and fee review process. And as we go through this presentation, we'll get into more details of the stakeholder meetings. I just want to kind of touch a little bit basis on our guiding principles staff use to develop fees. One, it's revenue neutral. So basically, some would pay less and others will need to pay more. It's not a fee for service model. Fees must be able to be implemented statewide, and we wanted to make the fee structure simple to understand. Knowing if we added complexity to the fee structure in determining the fee amount, it would potentially increase staff's time, resulting in additional cost. We also covered that indirect and our foundational program costs are added on top of the direct program expenditures. Fees should be set also to minimize yearly swings. We also wanted to acknowledge at the beginning of the fee setting process 4 primary issues. One, that there are wineries throughout the state that have never been under any permitting coverage or were under a waiver of discharge and did not pay a fee and are now subject to the statewide general order and are required to pay a fee. Two, some wineries who are currently under an individual WDR may change and enroll in the statewide general order. Some may see their fees decrease, while others may see their fees increase. 3, that the winery general order provides 2 opportunities for the discharging community to reduce state water board and regional water board workload in the administration of winery general order, and should therefore result in a fee reduction for dischargers. And we'll get into this a little more details, but 1 is the local agency oversight, and 2, an improved sustainability programs. And then 4, since the program staff does not estimate full enrollment of existing wineries to occur until January of 2024, it will take some time for revenue expenditures to normalize due to the changing enrollment numbers. And I think this is most important here. Fee staff also emphasize the ability and a commitment to regularly review and the fees and reductions as the program matures and stabilizes. Next slide, please. So as we go through this presentation, we'll go through the fee development timeline. We'll talk about the stakeholder outreach that we participated in. We will talk about projected program expenditures, our estimated ongoing staff workload, and our proposed fee option, which is a fee by volume. We'll discuss our fee reductions that we're proposing, and then we'll also open it up to questions. And prior to questions, we'll also be addressing some of the comments that we've received. So before we do get to the questions, we will address some of the comments that we did receive. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to just again touch based on basically what our fee development timeline was. And I want to state, even before the January 2021 Winery General Order was adopted, while the order was going through development, we had an opportunity to host a fee stakeholder meeting prior to the Winery General Order being adopted, just to kind of go over, again, introductions and the process and our fees, and again, the fee setting process and the budgetary process. However, things really ramped up once the order was adopted. And again, we held 2 meetings, one on the March 15th and one on April 28th. And we'll go over those in a little more detail here in a moment. And then today we're here for consideration of a proposed fee schedule. Now, we discussed taking this item to the board for consideration and adoption as part of the water quality fee schedules that normally go in front of the board annually in September. However, regional boards staff reached out to us and stated there were wineries that wanted to start enrolling in the statewide general order this summer and not have to wait to begin the process until the fall. Therefore, we are bringing this item to you today for consideration and adoption. So next slide. So at this point, what I'm going to do is I'm going to hand it off to Glenn Osterhage, and he's going to discuss our stakeholder meetings.
Thank you, David, and good morning, Vice Chair and board members. I'm not sure if the board chair has returned back to us or not, but as David indicated, the focus on my presentation will be on the 2 stakeholder meetings held since the board adopted the general order back in January. And as David indicated, our first one was back in March. We went over the fee development process that David already went through in a little more detail. At this first meeting, we presented 2 different annual fee options. The first one we call by fee by volume. It's a very simplistic, easy, identifiable measure in which to assess fees. And we also presented what we call a fee by threat to water quality and complexity. I will often just refer to that as threat and complexity if I use that later on in the presentation. So the threat and complexity one can be more staff intensive to identify. Whatever site characteristics are determined that would increase either threat or the complexity would have to be reviewed on a yearly basis just to make sure the site characteristics are still in place. So we presented both of those. And as David indicated, we also did propose 2 different fee reductions. The first one is called local agency oversight. The model right now that most people talk about is Napa County with the work that they do with the operations in that area, and then also approved sustainability programs. So with those 2 options for fees and the 2 different reductions, we did solicit comments from participation or those participating. We did receive what I'm calling a third fee for annual fees. It's the first bullet point under post-meeting comments. And in short, what this was asking for is to have a relatively higher application fee and then have preferably lower and sometimes significantly lower annual fees. So on the surface, I will say this is a perfectly rational proposal to be given to us. With the way we handle our annual fee setting process, we would have some logistical issues with this method. One is if we over collect on 1 year, we do not hold that money for a program. It all goes into our waste discharge permit fund. And in the years, if we under collected, we don't go back to the discharger to collect our shortage. So it's a year by year basis. We get our budget from the legislature and approved by the governor. On a year-by-year basis, we'll review and set fees for that year specifically. So when I discussed this, and later on, we have, I think, representatives from the Wine Institute that presented this. They're wanting to make some more comments on that proposal. They can. It was just where our accounting processes are. It's a year-by-year basis. We don't have a side bucket or account where we can hold money if we collected a bunch of money up front. For our fee reductions, initially we did throw out a local agency oversight reduction of 35% and sustainability program of 10%. There was a lot of discussion during the meeting regarding the reductions. Generally, the commenters preferred a higher local agency oversight reduction. And in general, of the two annual fees that were presented, although we'll never get consensus, the general agreement was, or preferred option was, the fee by volume. It's easier on a year-by-year basis. So with that, we can go to the next slide, please. We met again at the end of April. One of the discussions that we had in the first meeting was the workload that staff were going to be doing for this activity. Everyone agreed that it was going to take 3, 4, maybe 5 years for the enrollments to get completed. Everyone understands there's a workload associated with the enrollment, but there was a lot of questions about what would staff do once you have everyone enrolled. And that was probably one of the reasons of the nexus for the proposal of having lower annual fees with the higher application fee, is the ongoing workload would be less than the enrollment process. And we have a slide later on, we'll show the different activities that staff is anticipating to do during the enrollment process, and also the activities that they plan to do after the enrollment or the continuation of maintaining that permit coverage. So we kind of went over a lot of the workload issues, a lot of discussions and comments on that. We simplified our presentation just to a single annual fee by volume, since those the comments we received were all in support. Again, not necessarily all in favor, but all in support of an annual fee by volume. We did also increase our initial projection for the reduction for local agency oversight. We went from 35% to 50%, and we kept the approved sustainability discussions at 10%. So again, we did ask for comments from participants, and in general, as we did in the first meeting, the comments we got were in support of the fee by volume. We did get some other comments that the local agency oversight should still be higher, sustainability program reductions should be higher, but right now we're staying with the 50 and 10%. Next slide, please. So in all of our conversations, we did discuss what are our anticipated costs. And as David indicated in his opening comments, we're dealing with a lot of estimates. This is anticipation of what staff is expecting to use on a year-by-year basis. So focusing on the left-hand side, there's an estimate of 16 PYs is the acronym for staff. So 16 staff statewide, 2 identified at the state board, 14 out in the regions. And we're currently using an average costing of $200,000 per staff. Our actual costs are a little bit higher than that, but we're trying to use a number that we can justify and go forward with. So 16 staff at $200,000. I'm moving over to the right-hand column. It's about $3.2 million of anticipated expenditures. Again, these are estimates of what staff is expecting to do through the enrollment and post-enrollment with the maintenance of the permit. As David indicated, we do have some enrollees currently paying annual fees that will remain under individual order enrollment. And we forecast or predict maybe about $700,000 of revenue will still come in from the individual enrollees. Again, it's tough to tough to forecast because we're not sure exactly which ones are going to rotate over to the statewide general order, which ones will remain, but we're forecasting $700,000. So the very bottom right-hand corner, it's about $2.5 million of revenue we're needing to generate from all those that are going to enroll under the statewide general order. So that's our initial target. We have been committed through all of our conversations to review this It may be a year or two before we have better data, but once the enrollments come in, the program matures or stabilizes, we'll have a better idea of which facilities are going to come in each of the different tiers, how much revenue is coming in, how many will remain as individual enrollments, and we'll be able to assess our revenue projections with what will end up being any updates to staffing requirements going forward. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to go into detail on all these bullet points. We do have program staff available if there are any questions, but this first slide here is anticipated workload for enrolling these facilities under the new statewide general order. These are normal processes that everyone agrees is going to happen to get everyone under enrollment through that process. Again, we can come back to this if there's any questions. Next slide, please. This next one was probably more identified with our participants on what will staff be doing as far as maintaining or ongoing maintenance of the permit. So we're calling this compliance and enforcement activities. So there is anticipated to be ongoing workload by staff even after everyone is enrolled. So again, I'm not going to go into details here, but we'll take questions as needed later on. Next slide, please. So here's our proposal that we're going to do fee by volume. The enrollment tier is just presented on this table for informational purposes. Anyone enrolled under tier 1, which is over 10,000 and below 30,000, their fee would be $750. Tier 2, we broke down into 2 different volume ranges. The fees are fairly comparable. It's $1,000 versus $1,200. Tier 3, again, we have 2 different tiers within that range. And then tier 4, we have 3 different ranges, obviously increasing with the higher volume. I do want to state it's not listed here. As David indicated, if there is not a separate fee for wineries adopted, facilities will be enrolled and will pay what we call our WDR, or waste discharge requirement fee. The minimum fee, I'm going to round this off so we don't have to worry about dollars, but it's about $2,900 is the fee. Some facilities do get a reduction off of that. But we're estimating about 80% of the enrollees under this tier, under this order, will be in tier 1 and tier 2, which will pay less than they would if they use the existing fee structure that we have in place. So there are about 20%, the higher volumes, these are all tier 3 and tier 4, processing 300,000 up to 15 million, that would pay a fee comparable or higher than depending on how their threat and complexity is currently defined on an individual order. Next slide, please. And then, as indicated earlier, most of the discussion was centered around fee reductions. Local agency oversight, as I indicated before, is focused right now on the Napa County with the work that they're currently doing. The actual program as it relates to the Winery General Order has not been fully defined. It still needs to be hammered out with the San Francisco Regional Water Board. So we've had discussions that, depending on how things shake out when it's implemented, there is a good chance that we will come back to the board for consideration for a different fee reduction level. If the analytics come out that a fee reduction of 70, 75, 80% or whatever it's going to be is justifiable, then we will come back to the board to readjust the fee reduction. It is also possible, as other regions develop any type of local agency oversight, we may have to structure and have different tiers of oversight. So again, none of this is currently defined, but hypothetically, we could have one level where someone gets 30% reduction, another one gets 50%, and another one, because they're doing more work on behalf of the water boards, could get a 75, 80% reduction. So we have options that we can come back to the board with. Once everything gets enrolled, as I indicated before, it stabilizes, matures, we'll be able to identify, how much staff workload is being reduced by using the local agency model versus using the standard model of the regional board staff doing the work. And the same thing with sustained approved sustainability programs. As they become developed and they're identified, what's the impact or the reduction or anticipated reduction of staffing, If it needs to be a higher percentage once they're in place, then we do anticipate coming back to the board to review that for consideration as well. Next slide, please. So we did receive one comment related to the board agenda item today. It came from the Wine Institute, and I do believe they have a representative who will be commenting later on. So if there's any direct questions, we'll have someone be able to address that. But we had three major items that we took out of their comments. The first one, and David already mentioned this, is that some dischargers currently paying a fee, they'll pay more, and that is possible. Number of different reasons that could happen. We're not talking about those not enrolled. We're talking those that are currently enrolled in individual order that will decide to transition to the statewide order. We hope that most of them will have a fee decrease or pay a comparable fee, but we do recognize that there will be a couple or handful of facilities that could be subject to a higher annual fee. The second bullet point, dischargers enrolled, and use the acronym here, local agency oversight, should only pay an application fee to the state, and they would not be subject to any annual fee since the work would be done by the local agency. Through staff conversations, we do anticipate a continued staff presence within the statewide general order. So right now we're anticipating continue to have annual fees. But as we indicated before, once the local agency oversight process comes into place, we'll be able to assess what that fee reduction should be. And the Wine Institute also is recommending that the fee reduction related to sustainability programs be set at 25% rather than the staff recommendation at 10%. So again, the board will have the ability to set what they feel is appropriate. Again, once the sustainability programs are defined, we could eventually come back to the board to reassess or change that fee reduction as well. Next slide, please. So with that, I'm going to hand it back to David, but I will be available if there's any questions. So David.
So yes, and like Glenn said, and like we said all along, and again, through acknowledging with our stakeholders, we understood developing this fee structure that we needed to develop a baseline basically, and start with a fee structure, knowing the potential projected expenditures, but also knowing that there are several moving pieces that are going to take a little time to stabilize over the next few years. Again, one, enrollments, and two, as Glenn mentioned, I mentioned earlier about how the local agency oversight and the sustainability programs are going to play out, and then how those reductions look like, and how that kind of affects our overall staff expenditures. And then based on that, that was why we were committed to continue to review on an annual basis this fee structure, working with the community, working with executive management, our board members, region board staff, program staff, on continue to kind of ensure that we get where we need to eventually get to when we look at covering our cost and the fee structure. So with that said, I have again, Glenn's here, myself, and then program staff, if there are any questions at this time.
Questions? So I may have missed this, but I just want to make sure we have a change sheet. Do you want to take an opportunity to make any comments about the change sheet?
So Glenn, do you want to talk about the change sheet real quick?
Yes. So I'll go ahead and take that one. So if we can go back to the presentation on the slide that has the annual fees. Sorry about that. I hope we have a chance to bring the presentation back up. As we're waiting for that, so the bottom or the lowest fee starts at 10,000 gallons of processed water up to 30. There are some instances where a facility may start higher than 10,000, and for various operational reasons may have a year or two where their volume is lower, but they're going to stay within the program. So one of the items on the change sheet was that they would still be assessed the minimum fee, which we're proposing is $750, even if they went below the defined $10,000, I mean 10,000 gallons. And there may be some times where within the conditions of the order, I think it's the condensed nature of a bunch of facilities in the same area, that some facilities may be asked to enroll by regional water boards, even though the volume is below 10,000. So one is that they'll still pay the annual fee, even though they're below the 10,000 on the fee schedule. And the other one is there are some facilities that may start as tier one. Tier one is paying or proposing $750 that will be required to actually enroll as a tier two. And so one of the items on the change is to require them to pay the minimum tier two fee, which is $1,000. So it's just a way of making sure that if your enrollment tier is a little different than your volume as it defined in the fee schedule, that we'd still identify what actual fee that facility or operation is going to pay.
Okay.
And excuse me, Vice Chair, the PowerPoint that it's on currently, the computer has froze up. So I can't pull it up because I am on a different page. So we're seeing if we can pull somebody else and bring it up. So
Okay.
unless you still,
I can bring it up right now. Give me 1 moment, please.
okay.
Okay, and then while that's happening, I just want to give my fellow board members another opportunity. Do you have any questions? Okay, so for me, I'm definitely interested in learning about opportunities for adjustments for sustainability and also for the local agency. And I know there are a number of stakeholders interested in that as well. And in particular, I know Region 3 is interested in the sustainability piece, and Chair Wolf over there. So could you talk a little bit about the time horizon on, looking at, opportunities to make adjustments? And of course, I know there's the number of stakeholder meetings that you have throughout the year. So maybe talk a little bit about that.
Okay, I'm going to ask if Laura Wardrip can address some of the timeframes that program is looking for sustainability programs or the local agency oversight. As indicated, we will have our normal annual fee stakeholder meetings that if items come up throughout the year through the iterations of the budget, we could have those in what we call our general stakeholder meetings, but we can also just have specific winery meetings in future years as needed.
Yeah, and thank you for the handoff, Glenn. Just really quick, with the local agency oversight, it's a multi-year process to work with Napa County, which is the county that would be pursuing that option potentially first. And the upfront work with the regional board, there's a cost to assisting the Napa County with enrolling the wineries, and there's an upfront workload for the regions as well as working with Napa County on implementation. As we move through the first few years, if that happens, that's when we would be looking at reductions or even increasing that reduction. With the sustainability programs, the upfront staff time to review those plans, because right now there are no sustainability plans that are designed for this order in particular, because the order was just adopted. And so there's a lot of work for State Board of the Regions to look at those sustainability programs and actually accept them to be a compliance mechanism for the order. So once those kind of come into play and the roles are assigned and the roles are kind of fleshed out with the regions or State Board, depending on the regional scale of the sustainability program, then we would be looking at in the next few years further reductions. But the reason the 10% isn't higher right now is because of the staff workload up front to work with industry and stakeholders on those. But that's kind of the staff perspective.
Okay.
And Melissa Gunter from the San Francisco Bay region is on, if Melissa wanted to say anything.
Melissa from Region 2, our San Francisco Bay Area. I don't have anything additional to add just yet, but I am open to any questions around the local agency oversight program as it plays out in the San Francisco Bay region, which does include Napa County. who we are actively developing an implementation plan currently with in order to better understand roles and responsibilities moving forward, and how does that workload look between the two agencies. So we are definitely in the works with that right now.
All right, thank you, Ms. Gunther and Ms. Worthrup. Okay, so I see we've got the fee schedule here. Mr. Osterhage, you want to go through this?
Yes. So yeah, a little visuals a little easier than verbal sometimes. So the very top box, which is under tier 1, as you notice that the very bottom is greater than 10,000. So if you had a volume discharge of say 8,000 on this fee structure as originally proposed, you would not pay an annual fee. But we did realize there could be relatively, it's not going to happen very often, but there could be some situations where someone may be enrolled as a tier 1, but their volume is below 10,000. And so one of the additions was to have them be charged what we're calling here the tier 1 fee. That 10,000 was listed to mirror what's in the adopted winery order. And then under tier 2, where it begins at greater than 30,000, there could be some tier 1 volume facilities. For illustrative purposes, let's just say they're doing 20,000 gallons per year. But for certain situations within their operations, they're required to enroll as a tier 2. The additional language would have them be assessed the lower of the tier 2, which is $1,000. So that's what the change sheets were for. For those two, should be fairly minor, but they could happen just to make sure people are paying or know what fee they're going to be assessed.
Okay, thank you for that additional explanation. All right, I think unless there are any other questions, we'll move on to comments. And Ms. Townsend.
Yes. Hold one moment. So the first speaker we have will be Danny Merkley.
Good morning, Mr. Merkley.
Good morning. Thanks for the opportunity. I was hoping my colleague Noelle would go first. She is much more detailed and in her understanding of all of this. But anyway, I am Danny Merkley with the California Farm Bureau. I've been working with your staff, with the Wine Institute and others, I think going back to 2015 on this program. It's been a very steep learning curve for your staff, and as new staff has rolled in over that process. I've been working with your fee branch for over 16 years, and they have always been very professional, very transparent, and they're always accessible to answer questions and whatnot. I can't say enough for them, even though I hate their end product. We're supportive of the fee by volume structure, primarily because many of our members are the very smallest wineries. We've got 5, 10, 15, 20 acre vineyards that produce their own wine down in San Diego, up here in the foothills and other areas throughout the state. So we're supportive of that by volume. These fees do come at a very difficult time with the wildfires and the impacts of the pandemic on many of our small mom and pop operations, as well as the larger winery operations. So it couldn't be at a more difficult time. But remember, as difficult as these new fees are, it's really the cost of compliance that hits us the hardest. Fees are almost more insult to injury than it is the cost of compliance. If you're perceived to have some possible threat to water quality, and in many cases, it just isn't so, but the oversight is necessary. So with that, just want to reiterate that we are supportive of the fee by volume structure that's laid out. So thank you, David and Glenn, for your work on this, and program staff as well.
Thank you, Mr. Merkley.
The next speaker we have is Carrie Fisher.
Good morning. I actually just called in case Danny needed me, but he eloquently stated everything, so I don't have any other comments.
Thank you, Ms. Fisher.
The next is Joanne Kipps.
Hi, hello, good morning. I want to congratulate staff for adopting or proposing the fee by volume. It takes out a lot of uncertainty and ambiguity between offices and even between staff. So that's a good thing. I hope that the state board will, through presentations to state board, people involved in the program can update the state board in terms of their schedule of enrollment, whether the actual time schedule is actually achieved or whether there's a lag period, because I find it to be somewhat ambitious, but I'm hopeful for you guys. So so good job on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kipps.
And the last speaker we have is Noel Creamers.
Good morning, Madam Vice Chair and members of the board. I'm Noelle Creamers with Wine Institute. And I want to start by expressing my appreciation to staff for making themselves available to talk through the specifics of the proposed fees that are for wineries subject to the Winery General Order. Wine Institute believes the proposed fee framework is fair. However, there are a few changes that we would like to request, as staff discussed earlier in their presentation. First is in reference to fees for wineries in the local agency oversight program. So wineries in Napa County have been operating under Napa County's winery program for a number of years and are used to working with the county. And we're hopeful that the negotiations between the regional board and the county will come to fruition, and there will be a local agency oversight program in Napa County for those wineries. However, those wineries don't want to have to pay a fee both to the county and then also to the state board if the county is doing all the work. We understand that there's a need to pay the upfront costs of the negotiations and the initial staff timeframe, but we would like to see moving forward that wineries pay just to the county, not also to the state board. And I really appreciate staff's mention that they will revisit this issue, but we'd like to really impress upon the board the need to come back soon and relook at fees. I mean, we would be hopeful that a winery would only pay to Napa County, but we understand that maybe if they got an 80% reduction of the fees, that would be more appropriate. And then second, we believe that there should be a larger savings for wineries that are certified sustainable by approved sustainability certification program. I want to point out that the California Sustainable Wine Growing Alliance is actually in the process of piloting a winery water tool that will help wineries analyze their water use and opportunities for better managing that and reducing risk to the environment through their practices. And that program and other programs like it would take weight off of regional and state board staff, because the wineries are more understanding of their impacts on water quality. And so we think that it is appropriate to have a fee reduction. So we appreciate the offer of that reduced fee, but we think that it should be set more at like a 25% reduction. And then lastly, we think it's really, really important to keep the costs low and ensure an efficiently run program. In our quick analysis of WDR fees since 2005, we did not find an instance of fees reducing. They've been on a regular trajectory of increases over time. And so our concern is if you don't make the reductions and don't keep them low, that we know they're going to increase over time, and at some point they could become untenable. So I just want to, though, reiterate our appreciation for staff working with us as fees were developed, and particularly addressing our concerns that we raised when the winery order was adopted about the tier structure by separating the fees within tiers. That really does help, and we appreciate that. And I'm happy to answer any questions if board members have them, but thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kremers, and thank you for your leadership on this issue, both today and also in the development of the winery order. Any questions? Okay. Well, I would just like to take this as an opportunity to say that although I very much appreciated the opportunity to work with staff and stakeholders on the development of the order, as expected, with any time you have something new, there's still some kinks that need to be worked out. And then also, it's in the name of flexibility and providing for unique circumstances at each of the regions. I think that the order ended up getting a little complex. And so just want to flag that to both staff and my colleagues here on the board, that this is an issue that I'm going to continue to be looking at, both in terms of cost of compliance and fees, and look forward to these ongoing discussions as ways to address both fees and cost of compliance, whether it's through the local agency, the sustainability program, or just an opportunity to hear back from our staff on a report back on how the order is being implemented. So with that, I would invite if any board members interested in making a motion.
Yeah, I'll just say that I really appreciate all the work that's been done here to think through the development of the fee schedule. I share a lot of the same concerns of Vice Chair Diadamo, just in terms of I think the challenges that lie ahead for a lot of these wineries, and just getting through the process, enrolling, getting up to speed, meeting the requirements are going to be a big lift for a lot of these folks. And so I'll be interested in tracking this as it goes along as well. And I've been thinking about the comments about the way the fee structure is set up makes sense. The reductions for the local agency oversight and the sustainability program, I think are appropriate for now, for starting. But I really do want to emphasize that it's important to come back. It really is. I mean, there's so many unknowns right now in terms of how many wineries will enroll, their level of participation. They're going to true up their data so they'll have a better sense of their tiers even and where they fall. So there's just a lot of unknown right now. And ultimately, I'm really interested in how do we incentivize participation in these types of programs. So like the sustainability program. So, when Danny Merkley, for example, and other stakeholders talk about the overall cost of compliance, a lot of these wineries, they have vineyards as well. They're in irrigated lands programs. There's some other permits, maybe stormwater and other things that we aren't even really focusing on right now. But all these add up, and we're just talking about our state and regional board activities. There's others as well that they have to deal with. So these are true impacts, and going forward, we really should look more closely at the cumulative costs that the wineries are facing, and help that inform our fee setting process, I think. And then factoring in how these types of sustainability programs can really help provide measurable benefits and some relief to these folks. I get that we have to cover our costs. I think today this is a fine starting point, but really do look forward to the ongoing conversation here. So thank you again for all your work. And with that, I'm comfortable making a motion for adoption today.
And that includes the change sheet.
Yes, thank you, including the change sheet.
All right.
I'll second.
Okay. Oh, welcome back, Chair Esquivel. We're just getting ready. I was going to ask Ms. Townsend to call the roll on item number 5.
Okay. Board Member McGuire,
Aye.
Board Member Firestone,
Aye.
Board Member Morgan,
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo,
Aye.
Chair Esquivel.
Aye.
Okay,
Thank you.
thanks for that. And with that, the motion carries. Thank you all. Thanks to all the stakeholders and Mr. Ciccarelli and Mr. Osterhage. Thank you. Okay.
Thank you, everyone. And
I
thank
was,
you, Vice Chair.
I was actually, Chair Esquivel, thinking about just inquiring on the next item, how long it's going to take, and maybe thinking about a break, but I will turn that over to you.
I think that's wise. I think we should go ahead and give ourselves a quick break here. We're almost nearly at 11. And then we can probably look to have lunch certainly after that next item. And then I think sets us up well for item number 7. So thank you. And thank you for virtually handing the gavel back here and virtually taking it to begin with. I really appreciate it. And so we are then going to go ahead and let's take a say 15-minute break so we can go ahead and come back here at 11:10 and continue on with item number 6. And thank you everyone for the flexibility here. Thanks. See you soon. Okay, everyone, I think we can begin to gather back. And we can move on to item number 6, which is consideration of adoption of proposed general waste discharge requirements for vegetation treatment activities conducted in conformance with the California Vegetation Treatment Program. Good morning, everyone. Glad to have you with us.
Good morning, Chair Escobar and members of the board. I will just jump right into it. So can everybody hear me okay?
We can.
Okay, great. My name is Jeannie Mesha, and I am the supervisor of the non-point source pollution unit in the Division of Water Quality. And I am joined here today by Chris Monnery, environmental scientist in the non-point source pollution unit, Paul Han, environmental program manager in the Division of Water Quality, Phil Crater, assistant deputy director of the surface water branch in the Division of Water Quality, and Tim Regan, senior staff counsel in the Office of Counsel. So this agenda item today is to consider adoption of the proposed general waste discharge requirements for vegetation treatment activities conducted in conformance with the California Vegetation Treatment Program. And I'll be referring to this as the proposed vegetation treatment general order, or the proposed order, or proposed general order throughout the presentation. Next slide. Thank you. In this presentation today, I will explain the goals of the proposed vegetation treatment general order, how the proposed order aligns with the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection's California Vegetation Treatment Program. I'll talk about the conditions of the proposed order and how project proponents would enroll in the proposed order. And then I'll also talk about the public comments that we received during the public comment period on the draft order. And before I go any further, I'd like to recognize here that development of this order has been a team effort, and I'd like to thank the other members of the team who are here with me today, but also others who helped, such as Adriana Renteria and her staff in the Office of Public Participation, Beth Payne and her staff in the Division of Water Quality, and then also staff from the Regional Water Board Forest Activities Program. Next slide, please. So the main goal of the proposed vegetation treatment general order is to support the increase in pace and scale of vegetation treatment that is being done across the state to reduce wildfire risk, while also protecting water quality. As we all know, the types of fire that we've seen in the last few years are themselves a threat to water quality. So we support the urgent need to reduce the fuel load across the state's landscape. So we wanted to help projects get implemented quickly in order to reduce the impact of these wildfires to water quality. So we coordinated with the Board of Forestry and Fire Protection to align the proposed vegetation treatment general order with the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program to streamline permitting. Next slide, please. Before I discuss the conditions of the proposed general order, I wanted to give a quick summary of the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program. The Board of Forestry developed this program in response to former Governor Jerry Brown's Executive Order B52-18, which recognized the increased size and intensity of wildfires and ordered the Natural Resources Agency to double the statewide rate of forest treatments within 5 years. So the vegetation treatment program is vital for reducing wildfire risk in the state, and it aims to treat 250,000 acres per year of vegetation throughout a defined area of the state called the treatable landscape, which primarily includes the state responsibility area, but also includes pieces of the local responsibility area. And the way that the vegetation will be treated is through prescribed fire, manual and mechanical thinning of vegetation, herbicide application, and prescribed herbivory. In December 2019, the Board of Forestry certified a programmatic environmental impact report for the program. And this document analyzed a wide range of potential environmental impacts from vegetation treatment activities, and also presents standard project requirements and mitigation measures to reduce those impacts. Multiple state departments, including the water boards, collaborated with the Board of Forestry on this environmental document and provided suggestions and considerations that were included in the programmatic environmental impact report. Next slide, please. So now I'll talk about the conditions of the proposed vegetation treatment general order. To comply with the proposed order under consideration today, project proponents would be required to follow the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program framework. And what this consists of is working with the California Department of Forestry and Fire Protection, also called CAL FIRE, by submitting information about the project location and project type. It also consists of completing a project-specific analysis that identifies the potential environmental impacts of the project, and also identifies the appropriate standard project requirements and mitigation measures to reduce impacts. It also includes making a determination that the project is within the scope of the programmatic environmental impact report. It's possible that some projects may be outside of the scope of the programmatic environmental impact report, and those projects would not be covered or would not be able to enroll in the proposed order. And lastly, complying with the vegetation treatment program framework means actually implementing the standard project requirements and mitigation measures that are identified in the project-specific analysis. So in addition to following this framework, project proponents would also have to comply with regional water quality control board basin plan prohibitions and requirements. But these should be addressed if a project proponent implements the appropriate standard project requirements and mitigation measures that are identified in the programmatic environmental impact report. Lastly, the proposed general order would require project proponents to allow water boards access to the project site if the water boards become aware of a discharge of unauthorized waste to waters of the state. Next slide, please. Enrolling in the proposed vegetation treatment general order is designed to be simple and expedient. Automatic enrollment would be provided to any project proponent that works with CAL FIRE and follows the vegetation treatment program framework. And that process, again, generally is for the project proponents to complete a project-specific analysis, submit that information to CAL FIRE, who would then provide the information to us so that we can verify that the project is within the scope of the programmatic environmental impact report. Once we confirm that the project is within the scope, then we would issue a notice of enrollment to the project proponent. There would not be any fees required for this general order, and there would be no need, project proponents would not need to submit a notice of intent to the State Water Board. Next slide, please. We released a draft of the vegetation treatment general order for public review from March 5th through April 20th of this year. And we also held a public workshop on March 30th of this year. We received comments and questions from consulting firms, nonprofit organizations, academic institutions, the public, and other public agencies. So I'll now go through a few slides of public comments and explain our responses to those comments. Next slide, please. One comment that we received was that we should implement a monitoring plan to measure the effects of vegetation treatment projects on water resources. Neither the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program nor the proposed vegetation treatment general order requires water quality monitoring. Instead, both the vegetation treatment program and the proposed order rely on implementation of the appropriate standard project requirements and mitigation measures to reduce or prevent significant impacts to the environment. We also received a number of comments and concerns about herbicide use, requesting us to monitor herbicide application and use, as well as impacts from herbicides, also to only allow herbicides if there is no other alternative, and then also to require a site-specific evaluation of herbicide use that involves state water board on those decisions. The vegetation treatment program includes certain practices that are designed to reduce or avoid significant impacts, and therefore the proposed vegetation treatment general order would require that these practices are implemented. And these practices include obtaining all required licenses and permits prior to herbicide application, adhering to label directions for application rates and methods, using an applicator who is appropriately licensed by the state, and then also not applying terrestrial or aquatic herbicides within watercourse and lake protection zones of class 1 and 2 watercourses, if feasible. And if that is not feasible, then only applying herbicides by hand that are labeled for use in aquatic environments, and also notifying the regional water quality control board no fewer than 15 days prior to herbicide application. Also, the vegetation treatment program, and therefore the proposed vegetation treatment general order, would not allow herbicides to be applied within a 50-foot buffer of endangered plant species or within 50 of dry vernal pools. Next slide, please. We received comments that the State Water Board should take a more active role in overseeing vegetation treatment projects, including a more thorough review of the project-specific analysis. And our response to that is that the state and regional water boards collaborated with the Board of Forestry to ensure that water quality was protected through the standard project requirements and mitigation measures outlined in the Vegetation Treatment Program Programmatic Environmental Impact Report. The State Water Board, under the proposed Vegetation Treatment General Order, the State Water Board would verify that vegetation treatment projects are within the scope of the Programmatic Environmental Impact Report. And we would also retain the authority to inspect sites if there is concern about negative impacts to water quality. We also received comments about ensuring that roads are constructed and maintained to prevent sediment impacts. And the vegetation treatment program, the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program, does not include construction or maintenance of roads. Therefore, the proposed general order would not permit this type of activity. We also received several comments about allowing the use of long-term fire retardants as an approved vegetation treatment activity statewide. However, the Board of Forestry's vegetation treatment program environmental impact report did not analyze the potential environmental impacts of these materials. Therefore, the proposed vegetation treatment order would not permit the use of long-term fire retardants. Next slide, please. We also received some comments in support of the proposed general order, stating that the order would support consistency and efficiency needed to prevent future wildfires. And then lastly, we received comments to remove the requirement to obtain a construction general permit. And this was one change that we did make to the draft vegetation treatment general order in response to comments. We did remove the language in the order that had stated that enrollment in the construction general permit may be required. We took this out of the proposed order because it was causing confusion. We consulted with the Board of Forestry and learned that many of the vegetation treatment projects would not qualify as construction projects under the construction general permit. So instead, under the proposed general order, staff would review proposed projects on a case-by-case basis and inform project proponents if construction general permit coverage is required. Next slide, please. So for additional information, there are two websites shown here. The first one is a water board website for more information on the proposed order. And the second one is a website for more information about the Board of Forestry's California Vegetation Treatment Program. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you so much, Ms. Macia. Really appreciate the really incredible work by you and the rest of the team on this order. This general order is really going to help streamline a lot of the activities associated with our vegetation treatment goals here in the state. And so just really appreciate the great cross-agency work that has gone on to develop the order, to help it be responsive to what are, again, very difficult conditions given the wildfire risks that we see and growing risk of wildfire and the need to continue to treat and reach vegetation treatment targets. So I know that this general order will help streamline a lot of that work, and just appreciate the good quick work that's gone on and even thought of continuing to improve. I know this this program and this order even in the years ahead, knowing that it will continue to be a really important one. So just thank you. No questions off the bat. I see here we have about 3 individuals looking to comment. Look to my fellow board colleagues, so if there are any questions or comment to provide. And hearing none, we can move to our first commenter, which is Danny Merkley.
Actually, I do not need to comment, so thank you.
Thank you as well, Mr. Merkley. And then perhaps Carrie Fisher is who we have next. And Ms. Fisher, do you need to comment?
No, I do not. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. And then that leaves us with Wes Bolson.
Thank you, Commissioners and Board. I wanted to just comment on the great work that the team is doing, specifically around the long-term retardants being used under the VTP. And Jeannie, I know we received a lot of comments and you commented on that. And hopefully some of the work that we're doing in the state of California already with CAL FIRE, obviously to prevent devastating wildfire ignitions. They're being tiered to the federal EIR that the U.S. Forest Service was issuing. So it'll be a note would be simply because the VTP didn't include long-term retardants approved by the U.S. Forest Service, approved by the U.S. government for use. It tiers, CAL FIRE tiers to the federal EIR on that. And so hopefully we'll still figure out some great ways of working with the board and with you as we are applying it with utilities and transportation agencies and with others in the state of California in their rights of way under a federal EIR and under a NEPA that has been completed on long-term retardants. So even though it wasn't, we were trying to make sure it was explicitly in the VTP and how it would be handled, we'll hopefully just handle through the normal wildfire prevention and wildfire mitigation efforts in the state. So thank you for allowing me to comment.
Thank you, Mr. Bolson. I know that we want consistency across the landscape, knowing that we have always quite the patchwork of local, state, and federal jurisdictions on these lands, and knowing that this program here is targeted toward these state lands at this point. I just appreciate the cross-pollination from the federal land side of things and making sure that we have and/or have an eye toward consistency across the landscape, knowing so much of our landscape is owned on the federal side, and the success of these vegetation treatment programs, the ability to really start to bring down the risk to wildfire is going to be dependent upon our ability to really do that cross agency work. And so appreciate that. Thank you. Any other questions, comments, or considerations from my fellow board colleagues? And if not, I would entertain a motion. And just again, very thankful for the great work that's gone on, this streamlining work, just really critical in this time. So appreciate it.
I'll make a motion for adoption.
I'll second.
Great. Ms. Townsend, can you please call the roll call vote? And Ms. Townsend, you're muted. Apologies.
Oh, sorry. Board Member Firestone.
Aye.
Board Member Morgan.
Aye.
Board Member McGuire.
Aye.
Vice Chair Diadamo.
Aye.
And Chair Escobar.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you as well. The item is adopted and the vegetation order is adopted. Yeah, thank you. The vote was completed. Appreciate it, everyone. Okay, thank you. Now then we can move on to our next item. We are moving on to item, not actually, I did mention a lunch, but that item went quicker than I had anticipated. So we'll just move on to item number 7, which is now, actually I have an opening statement for, hold on one moment, as I make sure I have my proper statement, as I say my magic words here for this item. One moment. Okay. So welcome to this public hearing for the receipt of oral comments on the Clean Water Act Section 303D impaired water body listing recommendations for the 2020-2022 integrated report and draft staff report. This hearing is being held in accordance with the public notice dated May 20th, 2021. The deadline for submittal of written comments on the draft documents is Friday, July 16th by 12 noon. The State Water Board will not take formal action today. We will consider adopting the 303D impaired water body listing recommendations and staff report in a subsequent board meeting in January of 2022 after considering the comments that we receive. Your comments are being recorded and staff will prepare and circulate a written response to both the oral comments that we received today and the written comments that we receive on or before July 16th. We will have a staff presentation by Ana Maria Sañez, followed by public comments. And Ms. Saenz will also proceed with the staff presentation. So Ms. Saenz? Hello, and apologies for first butchering your last name.
That's quite all right. You got it right the second time. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Of course. Good to see you.
Good to see you as well. And good morning, Chair Escobar, members of the board. My name, as stated, is Ana Maria Saenz, and I am the Senior Environmental Scientist for the newly established Surface Water Quality Assessment Policy and Process Unit in the Division of Water Quality. My unit is one of 2 that is charged with the development of the 303D list. The other unit is the Water Quality Assessment Tools and Support Unit, which is led by Lori Weber, Senior Environmental Scientist. I'd also like to introduce Kira Tussaud, an environmental scientist from my unit, who is lead staff for the public process portion of the project. Also with me here today from the State Board is Rebecca Fitzgerald, Chief of the Standards and Assessment Section, and Assistant Chief Counsel Phil Wiles. There are also a number of regional board representatives on the line today. I do want to note that I'm not going to introduce the full list for brevity, but I'd like to introduce a representative for each. From the Central Coast, we have Mary Hamilton, Senior Environmental Scientist and Manager for the Basin Planning, Integrated Report, TMDL, and Non-Point Source programs. From the Central Valley region, we have Executive Officer Patrick Palupa. From the San Diego region, Chad Laughlin, Senior Environmental Scientist for the Monitoring, Assessment, and Research Unit. And from the Colorado River Basin, Nadim Securi-Ziwar, Senior Environmental Scientist of the Water Quality Standards and Non-Point Source Unit. As mentioned, the purpose of this item is to receive oral comments on the proposed 303D list portion of the 2020-2022 integrated report. After my brief presentation, we will be listening to comments and plan to develop a response to comments document, which will be released with the revised integrated report prior to board consideration. Next slide, please. During today's presentation, I will provide a short overview of the integrated report process, a summary of the proposed statewide 303D list, followed by a summary of listings and delistings by pollutant type. And then I'll close by outlining some important dates and next steps before I open it up to questions. Next slide. This slide illustrates how the integrated report is structured. It consists of two parts, the 303D list of impaired water bodies and the 305B condition report. Both are prepared to meet requirements for the Clean Water Act. Impaired water bodies are those where collected data reflects pollutant levels that exceed numeric thresholds that are in place to protect beneficial uses. Federal law requires that the 303D list is approved by the US EPA. The State Water Board's adoption of the 303D list serves as a recommendation to the US EPA. The other portion of the integrated report is the 305B report, a report on the overall condition of surface water quality. It is included in the integrated report, but it does not require State Board or US EPA approval. Therefore, we do not solicit public comments on this portion of the integrated report. I'd also like to note here that the integrated report must be submitted to the US EPA by April 1st of every even numbered year. Next slide. The Water Quality Control Policy for developing California's Clean Water Act Section 303D list or listing policy is the statewide policy that lays out a standard approach for how we develop the 303D list. It describes conditions that must be met to determine if a water body is listed as impaired or if it can be removed from the 303D list. These conditions, also called listing factors, describe statistical tests that are used to determine if water quality objectives are exceeded. The listing policy also contains requirements on how the assessment program is implemented. These requirements include how data is solicited, how we evaluate data for quality, how we map water bodies, and how we report and administer the public process. The listing policy was adopted in 2004 and amended in 2015. Next slide. This slide illustrates how we organize and report on assessed data. First, lines of evidence, or LOEs, are developed to show how we compare the data to a numeric threshold. This is how we answer the question, is there evidence here that a beneficial use is supported? We combine all our LOEs for a pollutant detected in a particular water body and make a decision. This is how we answer the question, based on all the lines of evidence, is the water body impaired for a pollutant? As you can see here from this graphic, we display LOEs and decisions for all pollutants detected in a water body in that water body's fact sheet. These are considered individual 303D listing decisions. So that's why you'll hear that a water body may be impaired for pollutant A, such as bacteria, and for pollutant B, for example, mercury. Water body fact sheets are contained in Appendix B of the integrated report for anybody's reference. Next slide. Once all the decisions are completed for a water body, it is placed in an integrated report condition category, which informs the 305B portion of the integrated report. There's a lot of text on the slide, so I'm going to walk through these conditions verbally. Water bodies are placed in category 1 are those that we can determine that at least one beneficial use is supported and there isn't evidence to indicate that any other use is impaired. When water bodies are placed in categories 2 or 3, there is not enough information to determine if a beneficial use is supported. Category 3 water bodies, there may be evidence that a beneficial use is threatened, so we place these water bodies on a watch list. Water bodies are placed in categories 4 or 5 when assessment of data determines that numeric thresholds are exceeded and a water body is impaired. These categories help us prioritize how the impairment may be addressed through the development of a total maximum daily load, otherwise known as a TMDL, or alternative program in order to restore the water body to meet water quality standards. Category 4 water bodies, a TMDL is not needed because a TMDL has already been developed and approved by the US EPA. Another program is being implemented to fix the impairment, or because the impairment is caused by pollution, such as low flow conditions or hydromodification, not a pollutant, such as bacteria or pesticides. Finally, all waters placed in Category 5 are those where at least one impairment exists and a TMDL is needed. Next slide. Next, I'm going to get into some of the specifics on the 2020-2022 integrated report. The listing policy allows us to assess data from 3 regions each cycle. These regions are commonly referred to on-cycle regions. For this cycle, this includes the Central Coast, Central Valley, and San Diego regions. Additionally, regions may opt to assess data during the off-cycle. The Colorado River Basin did so for the 2020-2022 integrated report. All readily available data, as defined in the listing policy, received prior to the data solicitation cutoff date of June 14, 2019 were considered. Typically, what happens is the regional water boards adopt their listing recommendations after a regional public process. The State Water Board then compiles the list and proposes it to the State Board for adoption before submitting to the US EPA. For the 2020-2022 integrated report, the State Water Board is administering the public process for all regional water boards. This procedure is consistent with the listing policy and a settlement agreement the State Water Board entered into with the Earth Law Center. Also, I want to note that the 2020-2022 integrated report combines 2 listing cycles. Next slide. In order to develop the 2020-2022 integrated report, staff at the state and regional water boards evaluated over 4.2 million rows of data. This is about a 200% data input increase when compared to data evaluated for the 2018 integrated report. I want to note that this percentage does not include data for continuous temperature measurements, which consist of almost 4 million rows of data. Evaluation of data resulted, back to the previous slide, please. Evaluation of data resulted in the development of almost 86,000 lines of evidence for over 1,600 water bodies, which is a 185% increase from 2018. This resulted in the development of over 25,000 decisions, which is a 280% increase. Before I go on to some of the more details, I wanted to take a moment to thank data providers for their contributions to the integrated report and working with us throughout the process. And I would also like to acknowledge and congratulate staff at the state and regional boards on the tremendous effort they underwent to assemble, evaluate, and assess this data. Myself and my staff have been assisting for a few short months in comparison to the almost 2 years others have been working on this.
Thank you for that, Ms. Sines. I just have to say, folks, if you don't mind going back to the last slide that just has some of those stats, just the incredible increase in the productivity and processing of the lines of evidence into everything is just really incredible. I often talk about the need for us to become a 21st century regulatory agency, and it's really off of these projects, these data streamlining and systems projects that allow us to do more, preserve precious human staff time for the sort of critical thinking that can be applied, and allow systems to simply better manage things. This is just unsung often and not praised enough. Just this incredible progress that we've seen these last years, and as we see just exponentially at this point, growing our capacity to assimilate data, and look forward to when these chances and opportunities to move this program to more real time even, and greater and quicker decision making on our part to help be protective of water quality and make sure that communities are understanding just even what the conditions of their water bodies are, and lead to then solutions and conversations on how to address them. This work is, so important, and I know it was so labor intensive for so long. It's still so labor intensive, but these improvements that have been made, I'm just blown away. So I just wanted to kind of pause and echo that thanks to all the great work I know that has been going on to make this real. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Next slide, please. This table shows the total number of impairments by region. The first column shows the total number of impairments as approved in the 2018 integrated report. The second and third column contain a count of recommended new listings and delistings. The last column includes a total number of listings for the 2020-2022 integrated report if all recommendations are adopted. The rows contrasted with gray highlight the regions that conducted assessments this cycle. And before I go on, I just want to remind the audience that once a water body is placed on the 303D list, the regional boards have the opportunity to prioritize which impairments they will work on. And then if you want more information about regional board priorities, then I suggest that you refer to the regional specific sections of the staff report for more information on that. Next slide. This slide breaks down listing recommendations by pollutant type. As you can see, the majority of listing recommendations are for metals and pesticides, followed by nutrients. We can infer that one of the main reasons why we are seeing an increase in listings, as shown here, is there was an increase in data available for this cycle across all on-cycle regions. The data used for these assessments was from a span of 9 years. Also, data was submitted under the Central Valley's Irrigated Lands Program, which likely influenced the nutrient and pesticide decisions. And finally, new listings and delistings in the San Diego region can be attributed to additional sampling efforts across their region, inclusion of water bodies that were not sampled before, and assessment of some new pollutants. Next slide. In contrast, this slide shows the delisting recommendations by pollutant type. As you can see, the majority of delisting recommendations are for bacteria. This can be attributed to the fact that this was the first integrated report where a broad application of statewide bacteria water quality objectives were applied for the protection of human health during water contact recreation. Statewide bacteria objectives adopted by the board in 2018 are protective of the Rec 1 beneficial use and are considered a better indicator of impairment than objectives that were used previously. For a little more context, this was the first time fecal coliform data were not used to determine standards attainment in fresh waters, and total coliform data were not used in any water body types. Only E. coli data in freshwater and enterococci data in marine estuarine and inland saline waters were used for assessment in the assessment process. This resulted in a significant number of delistings for previously listed bodies. However, it should be attributed that some delistings may be a result of improved water quality conditions in water bodies as a result of management actions implemented to address bacteria sources. Next slide. On June 4th, we released the draft integrated report and associated staff report. This date marks the start of the public review and comment period. On July 16th marks the close of the public comment period. If anyone wishes to submit a comment letter, the information on how to do so can be found in our public notice posted on our program's webpage. I've also provided a URL here. It is our goal to release response to comments and any revisions to the integrated report in December of this year and bring the integrated report for board consideration in January of 2022. Then we will submit to the US EPA no later than April 1st of 2022. Next slide. And with that, we are happy to take any questions and are also looking forward to hearing oral comments. We will be listening carefully to those comments and will provide responses in writing. And with that, I will close. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Really appreciate the graphic breakdown on just the listings and delistings, what they're for, the constituents, and even digging in a bit into the explanation for why we may be seeing certain listings here and then delistings when it came to E. coli and total coliform. So appreciate definitely all of that context, and no real question other than maybe just even looking out beyond this report cycle, anything to kind of preview, sort of just thoughts around the integrated report. This is one of those things that, it is a routine thing that is required here at the federal level as part of the Clean Water Act. So it's a long-standing component of the board's work and its program. What has changed is just the level of data that we are assimilating and using systems, again, to make decisions around. So just kind of wondering, if you have any thoughts on just the, the landscape a little longer term, and just yeah, any question or just thoughts around that again, because I just look at just my term here on the board so far, these last 4 years of the integrated report, where I know at first we were behind, right? It was really on the regions to complete a lot of this work oftentimes. And it's been this kind of balance of taking it a little in-house a bit at the state board level, doing these process improvements, but appropriately keeping balance here with the regions as they go through their principal work on this. But I don't know, it's been great to see us catch up, I guess I'll just say, on the reports here, but importantly, just exponentially be seeing this sort of data assimilation. It leaves me kind of wondering what we might see in the years ahead, just kind of forecasting out if there are any sort of thoughts around it.
Yes, definitely. I think that we can speak to a few efforts that we are undertaking. I mean, first and foremost, there's the establishment of my unit that provides additional resources to help with the public process and assessment side of things. It's really adding a lot to the workforce to help get things across the finish line. And then also allows time for Lori's unit to work on consistently improving the tools that we have to evaluate, organize, and assess the data. So as we see an increase in data inputs, as I'm sure we will over the years, we are also making the effort to improve our processes on multiple fronts. Rebecca, did you have more to add?
I'll just jump in for a minute, Henry. I think you see a culmination of years of work that the program has been on streamlining their data processes, figuring out ways to run multiple solicitations and multiple analysis for multiple years at the same time, which was not available a few years ago. And having a strict deadline from the court always provides incentive to keep me and you out of contempt of court. And I appreciate that from the staff.
Yeah, thank you, John. Ms. Fitzgerald, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think I'll leave it with what Anna Maria and John shared. Well, I will add actually one more thing, if I may, which is that we are speaking to the fact that we are running multiple integrated report cycles simultaneously. We're actively organizing the data that was submitted for what will be the 2024 integrated report cycle, and compiling it, organizing it, doing the QA, the quality control, and starting to work on doing the automation of making sure that we can do those automated LOEs. I want to say, I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but I think we're looking at 6 million or so data rows for the 2024 cycle. And then we will likely be initiating what will be the 2026 cycle and putting out data solicitation next year. So just sort of speaking to the fact that this is an ongoing process, and that we do get more and more data as there are such great monitoring efforts that are happening across the state.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. That what we're seeing the benefit of is more integration and just the routine monitoring that may be going on for other programs. But once we get it into, I think, is it CDN, that most of this data kind of pulls into, allows us to then make decisions off of data that's coming in, again, off of other programs or other, I think again of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program pulling in additional data because of just the better integration there. But it's also activities from other state agencies. That's this greater integration, particularly around our ability to make assessments on water quality impairments in our water bodies, is just incredible. I think I reflect often recently that we're at 50 years of the Clean Water Act next year. It's 50 years of these programs showing benefit, demonstrating an ability to improve our water quality in our watersheds. But if we want them to really be successful these next 50 years, knowing that there's still incredible challenges out there, looking at the number of listings and impairments, we're going to need to continue to refresh and reinvigorate things like the integrated report, which, again, are benefiting here from what is the care, time, and attention of you all. So just thank you. And importantly, our partners, data gatherers out there across the state who feed into this really critical work, fundamental ultimately to the board and its proceedings. So just can't thank you enough, and just appreciate the response to the general question here. Fellow board colleagues, thoughts? It looks like we have about 5 folks looking to provide comment, but by all means, questions.
Yeah, just a quick comment. Thank you. Just echoing all the accolades and the just huge workload here, and how much you've accomplished. Really impressed with the work, and so impressed. When I hear about delistings, I get excited. Obviously some of the reasons are for, as you mentioned, are for change standards and kind of redirecting in that way, and that's fine. That's us learning more about the science, about our water quality risks, and looking and updating each watershed and water body pollutant parity listing to reflect that. That makes sense. But the other ones, the success stories, the ones where dischargers have really invested in their watersheds, have actually achieved the standards through those investments and through greater monitoring and greater awareness. Those are the stories that I want to hear more about, that we need to be able to tell. And I know we've taken stabs at this. We've done this through our performance report, through different reporting, but I still think we can do better at sharing what those stories are. And even here with this, today I would like to hear if you have thoughts on any specific examples, if not later, just what some of those success stories are, and how dischargers and others have really collaborated to achieve these standards, because they are challenging. And the more we look and the more we know and the better we understand the science, honestly, the more challenging it's looking. So we have a lot of work to do. So it's important to celebrate the small victories. And that's just what I want to see us focus a little bit more on going forward. I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you, board member.
I'll just echo everything that both of you said. That was both our what was going through my mind, and just to add, Sean, to what you said, I think this is a great example of an opportunity to lift up outcome metrics of how well are our programs able to achieve the outcomes we're trying to do. And obviously it's not, we don't have total control. We have the regulatory programs, and really the folks that are doing the hard work are those, dischargers and local water protection programs to get the outcomes we need. But I do think this is a good example of an opportunity to do that. And again, I know we're doing some of that in some of the success stories in the annual report, like you said, board member, but I just couldn't help but take the opportunity to reiterate this is a chance to do some outcome metrics, thinking about these are core goals we have as an agency, and being able to lift that up. And again, do that in a way that also is pulling out which ones of these are really about achieving water quality, and not only just changes in data and methodology and standards, which are also important, but maybe not the core outcomes that we're trying to look at through metrics. But anyway, I just echo both thanks, impressive, amazing data, improvements in systems, and also just everything that you said, Sean, I think was top of mind. So appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. Other board colleagues, and we can start to go to comments if not. Okay. And I note, Mr. Buckley or John Buckley, you have your hand up. I think you're second on here, so you can go ahead and go first.
Was waiting to be unmuted. Thank you. So it's now good afternoon, and thanks for having the moment to be able to share I'm John Buckley, Executive Director for the Central Sierra Environmental Resource Center, and we're located in Twain Harte, northwest of Yosemite. The 2020-2022 integrated report that was just explained in detail to you totals over 5,000 303D listings, with, I note, roughly 1,000 more new listings than new delistings, which just underscores the scale of the challenge the Water Board is facing as it attempts to not just identify, but then to correct the impaired waters. And after reading through the report and really looking at it with scrutiny, the focus of these comments is to share for our center our strong support for the recommended 303D list that was produced through the exhaustive efforts of the Water Board staff. Because our center's biologists over the years have painstakingly complied with data quality objectives, acceptability criteria, and the requirements of the QAP, the Quality Assurance Project Plan, we know the rigorous protocols that are the basis for managing the water data that you're now looking at. We look at this integrated report as not just as a demanding lengthy list with water bodies in the state that could have some work, but we really see this report as something that the board has reflected on, data-driven identification of where water quality truly needs to be improved. And just a real quick example, 2 weeks ago in a local recreational lake that is very popular in our area, the lake was closed until corrective action could be taken for an upstream clogged sewer line spill and until subsequent sampling showed the water was safe again for family recreation. But ironically, that stream and lake are already on the 303D list, not because of a rare clogged sewer line or a pulse of pollution, but because there are often contaminants that more frequently feed into the stream and put it at risk. So as noted earlier, in a different part of this meeting, this summer season is off to an exceptionally dry start, and many forest streams are at very low flow. Some have already dried up. I've been out there seeing it. And over years of reviewing water quality monitoring results, our center staff has seen very clearly that dilutions from high flows in wet years often does reduce pollution. So conversely, this year, when 303D listed forest streams suffer very low water flows that will dwindle even more by late summer, there's especially high potential for contamination to rise to undesirable levels. And I want to emphasize that point. So in closing, I note that the latest extremely dry water year underscores how important it is for the state to identify impaired waters and to prioritize corrective actions. But perhaps most telling, despite the low flows occurring in forest streams, it's certainly there's going to be an exceptionally high level of visitation to those same streams for recreation and for relief from soaring summer temperatures like this coming weekend. So impairment of their Rec 1 beneficial uses will pose even more public health concern than normal due to the tremendous amount of visitation at these streams. So our center supports the integrated report, applauds the staff efforts that went into it, and appreciate the needs that it identifies. It does leave a lot for all of us to see as challenges that need to be corrected in the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Really appreciate your cogent comments and contribution to today's discussion. And yes, points well taken around the connection between quantity and quality. And glad that the board was established with both considerations in mind, because we're certainly seeing that drought continues to really challenge us on the water quality side, thinking of groundwater here, contaminants as well, which are also exacerbated and concentrated as supplies dwindle. So just thank you. Really appreciate your good comment and support. Next, we have Tess Dunham.
Hello, good afternoon. Tess Dunham with Contractors and Conway, here today representing the pyrethroid working group. The pyrethroid working group is a consortium of the major manufacturers of the pyrethroid pesticides. And we have been highly involved in California for a number of years, working with DPR and the regional boards on looking for proper stewardship, providing education, outreach to both the urban and the agricultural sectors, on making sure that our products are used properly, and following all label restrictions, as well as just common sense and good knowledge. With that, we have worked with a number of the urban stormwater agencies and are now actively engaged with the Central Valley and now the Central Coast Coalitions, helping to provide stewardship and education outreach materials for the proper use of pyrethroid materials. Through our involvement over the years, we worked very closely with the Central Valley Water Board in its stakeholder process, which included, a number of different stakeholders in the development of the Central Valley Basin Plan Amendment, which is a water quality control program that is specific to the pyrethroid pesticides. A big component of the control program is looking at pyrethroids in the fact that they are what we call a hydrophobic material, meaning that they tend to adhere to sediment and they bind to sediment very closely. And so we often, it is not as much the water column potential impacts from pyrethroids, but it's the sediment based. With that, typically we're looking at the bioavailable portion in water that could be problematic. And with that is basically looking at that dissolved fraction, much like we do with metals, where the CTR has metal criteria that are based on the dissolved versus the total fraction. Pyrethroids are similar with respect to the bioavailable portion is the portion that is of the greatest concern for the environment. So with that, the three regions, two of the regions had the same approach, and one region had a little bit of a different approach with respect to how they looked at their pyrethroid data and comparing it to determine, the appropriate criteria as part of its lines of evidence. Region 5 and Region 9 followed the approach that is within the Basin Plan Amendment, which was adopted by this board, which is really looking at just that dissolved fraction, utilizing, if you don't have the dissolved data directly, utilizing an equation that was adopted by the Central Valley Board and this board as part of that Water Quality Control Plan Amendment. We support that approach. We do think that is the proper scientific approach when you are evaluating pyrethroid data to determine whether it's going to have an impact and impair beneficial uses. Region 3, based upon our review of the 303D report, either used the total fraction or did not specify whether it was the total or dissolved. So, we think consistency with respect to the water quality criteria and the valuation for the integrated report is important across all of the regions. And with the fact that we do have the Basin Plan Amendment that this board has approved, we would encourage the board to go back or look or have Region 3 reevaluate its pyrethroid data, looking at the dissolved fraction, as was done with Region 5 and Region 9. And again, that would make it consistent. And we see that as being something being consistent in the integrated reports going forward. The only other comment we would have is for Region 5, who has gone through a very long stakeholder process to develop the water quality control plan, which involved POTWs, urban stormwater, agriculture, Department of Fish and Wildlife, many others that were involved in that process concerned about the impact that pyrethroids can have on the environment. We, have a pyrethroid control program for the Central Valley. With that, we, think it's more appropriate that instead of saying a TMDL is required for these new listings, that they be categorized as a 4B, meaning that the TMDL is not necessarily required because there's an existing program that already takes into account the need to implement activities, implementation plans, best management plans, a number of different activities. Monitoring is happening under that water quality control program. Rather than triggering the need for a TMDL, we already have a water quality control plan that applies throughout the whole of the Sacramento San Joaquin River Basin. That to us is the appropriate place for the implementation activities with respect to meeting beneficial and making sure that we are not impairing beneficial uses from the use of pyrethroid pesticides. So those are the comments that we would make with respect to the report. We will be putting those and submitting those in writing on July 16th, but appreciate all the effort and more than happy to answer any questions anybody may have.
Thank you, Ms. Dunham. I appreciate the comments and we'll reflect on them. Any questions from fellow board colleagues? Okay, seeing none. Thank you. Appreciate the contributions today, Ms. Dunham. Next, we have John Helly.
Thank you. How do you hear me?
Hear you well. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Thank you. Mr. Chair and other board members, I'm speaking as a private citizen, and I will start as follows. Bataquitos Lagoon is a tidal coastal estuary in South Carlsbad, California, bordering on the city of Encinitas on the north. It is designated by the California Resources Agency as an ecological reserve. It communicates with the Pacific Ocean via a hardened inlet that is maintained open perennially. A heavily used beach is just to the west of the lagoon, with Pacific Coast Highway 101 embedded in the landscape, with a bridge crossing the lagoon inlet. Recently, a large hotel, the Alea Maria, has opened up above the beach. As I have thoroughly documented elsewhere in the California Coastal Atlas, a website I maintain, the city of Encinitas has been dumping stormwater into the back of the beach for decades and is now implementing a complex new storm sewer that is yet unpermitted by the California Coastal Commission, and which will by design dump much larger volumes of wet season stormwater and store contaminated dry weather flows to be purged during storm events. 2 newly functioning outfalls have been added to the historic outfall as part of the design. I am speaking to you today to draw your attention to the fact that, in my opinion, the city of Encinitas is doing this in such a way as to evade regulatory oversight with the intention of dumping contaminated stormwater into a listed water body, Bataquitos Lagoon. Bataquitos Lagoon is on the 2018 303D listing and is also on the new list for 2020 and 2022. What good is the listing process that you are engaged in here today if the regional and state water boards fail to enforce its purpose? For example, Bataquitos Lagoon has no TMDL, and there's apparently no plan to develop one, although it has been on the 303D list for years. Whose responsibility is this anyway? The state board, the regional board, the US EPA, the Army Corps of Engineers, everybody, nobody, or some combination? I have submitted a detailed complaint to the San Diego Regional Water Quality Control Board in March 2021 and still have no written response. I was recently informed through a phone call with a junior staff engineer that the regional board finds no problems with what the city is doing, although I still await the rationale for this determination. It is my opinion that I only received this communication because I complained additionally to the executive director that I could not get a response from the staff who I had been directed to communicate with. So now I turn to the state board with the hope of more appropriate and effective oversight of this issue, and to additionally review the behavior and likely consequence of that behavior by the city of Encinitas. This municipality is threatening a unique coastal resource, which is already impaired with further unregulated pollution that may very well threaten human health and do long-term damage to an invaluable coastal resource. Finally, along with the Bataquitos Foundation, we are planning a new environmental monitoring program to baseline the condition of the lagoon before the new stormwater is dumped. We would like to work with the state board to contribute these new data to the regulatory process, and we'll seek the appropriate paths to do this. Respectfully, John J. Helly. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Helly. I appreciate your advocacy, and please do engage with our folks on how to best get that data as part of our consideration. Always open to and looking for additional data on all of these decisions. So thank you, and appreciate the flag. So next we have Sarah Ryan has her hand up. So Ms. Ryan, you may go next, and then we'll end here with Caitlin Kalua. You should be invited to unmute here momentarily.
Okay. Thank
Good
you.
afternoon.
Nice to see you. Thank you for allowing me to speak for a couple minutes here. I am the environmental director for the Big Valley Band of Pomo Indians. My name is Sarah Ryan. We are on the shores of Clear Lake in Lake County. And in the review that we've been able to do of the 303D impaired water body listing, we are noting something that's really exciting, which is there's a lot of tribal data in there. And although I believe that has happened in the past a little bit, there was a very strong push, I know, in Region 5 to not only to go collect some data from the Water Quality Exchange, the federal database, where all of us with water programs are putting our data, but also to do outreach. So I just want to commend Jennifer LeBay and others over at Region 5 for their outreach and their efforts to work with tribes this go around. And I think because of that data, you are seeing a much more thorough type of listing than perhaps the last go around. I'm seeing some creeks on there that normally or that we had always been monitoring, but the data didn't really make it into any sort of review and analysis by the board. So it is this time. And also the microsystems for Clear Lake and 2 tribes, including Big Valley, have had an extensive program since 2014. So I just want to encourage other regions to make sure that they connect with the tribes in their area, because they can have really extensive water monitoring programs that are based on locations and timeframes and water quality objectives that are really pertinent to the protection of tribal beneficial uses. As we all move forward with the adoption of tribal beneficial uses and designating water bodies within the specific regional basin plans, it's really important to ensure that these types of water body listings are given that extra look through because tribes use these waters in so many ways that aren't necessarily protected or captured by the the existing beneficial uses. So again, just we're looking more forward to a more thorough review of this. We'll be submitting comments on tribal letterhead, but I just wanted to get on and thank everybody for their efforts in Region 5 for working with us and for putting together a good product. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Ryan, for your incredible leadership all these years. The great work around harmful algal blooms, really incorporating the tribes in so much of that work. And to your point, better just getting tribal data into our processes has been something that I know you have worked well with us on. I think of Greg Gearhart in Office of Information Management and Analysis. And now that you really put a finer point on it, would like to explore and hear, let's have a conversation with Adriana Renteria, our tribal liaison, to think of how we do continue to gather tribal data into this program. I know recently we had our listening sessions when it comes to drinking water and drinking water challenges, and that too, a data exercise amongst us all. So just thank you for your long-time leadership in this space. And again, particularly around even our harmful algal bloom work, which the tribes have been so much at the forefront of. So thank you. And next, then we have Caitlin Kalua.
Let's see, am I unmuted here?
You are.
Oh,
hello,
perfect.
good to see you. Good afternoon.
Acting up.
Oh, it's okay. No worry in the least. Good to see you.
Great to see you too. Good afternoon, Caitlin Kalua, Policy Manager for the California Coastkeeper Alliance, which represents local waterkeepers throughout the state. As was already described, the integrated report and 303D list is a valuable tool to ensure impaired waters are identified and impairments are ultimately addressed, although the value of this report and list is only as good as the data used to inform it. California waterkeepers appreciate the inclusion of citizen monitoring data in the ambient water quality monitoring program that resulted in listing and delisting of specific water body segments in this draft report. However, we do remain concerned that there continues to be reliance on too old and at times too little of data. While the public can play an important role in providing data, there are existing barriers to the data submission process that discourages full public participation. This includes lack of notice when the data is excluded or disqualified. For example, an organization uploading data to DCEDN may think the data was successfully submitted, but learns years later that the data was disqualified for flaws that could have been identified at the time it was uploaded. The water boards we also encourage the water boards to prioritize and direct resources to update the publicly available data and maps informed by the integrated reports. For example, there are current data gaps, specifically in Region 9, that should be corrected in specific water bodies that are quite frankly in the wrong location. This will be in our written comment. The State Water Board also relies on stale data, with regions only on cycle and assessed once every 6 years. A recent California court decision, which was previously described, held that this assessment must be timely and completed every 2 years. We further encourage the State Water Board to update this process and end this 3-cycle approach to ensure that the integrated reports reflects current conditions and data for each region. understanding, of course, that is a large push, but ultimately we're hoping it'll become a part of the process, become easier as, every 2 years this becomes, well, the status quo and how business is done. Finally, we urge the inclusion of hydromodification and flow impairments as an important tool to identify and address rivers that are impaired by poorly timed or entirely too low flow. California can and should join other arid Western states in including hydromodification listings to protect flow impaired waterways. In California, hydrologically impaired waterways should be, but currently are not, listed under Category 4C, which is reserved for waterways that are impaired due to pollution not caused by a pollutant. Although hydrologically impairments do not trigger TMDLs, states can employ a variety of watershed restoration tools and approaches to address the sources of impairments, for in this case could be low or poorly timed flow under Category 4C. Our organizations look forward to providing further information in our written comment, particularly concerning the analysis used for both listing and delisting recommendations related to pathogens and E. coli and total chlorofluorine bacteria. That concludes my comment, and thank you for the opportunity to comment today.
Thank you so much, Ms. Kalua. Really appreciate your contributions today. Thank you. Board members, questions, comments, further thought around the 303D list? And just a reminder again, this is a workshop, so you don't have to vote on anything today.
I'll just make one more comment following up on the comments related to just the necessity of ensuring that people know how to get data that can be accepted into this process when they're collecting data. I was able to do a environmental justice tour of the Delta, and particularly around Stockton, and saw just a lot of the HABs, which is really bad already, and I think unfortunately will continue to increase. And I know that is an area that we haven't yet been able to have the kind of data that we need for this kind of process. I will say there were folks from the Central Valley Regional Board there who were really great and helping some of the local groups to know how to collect data that will be both of adequate quality to get into this process, and also just the process of getting it in the right place. So I really appreciate those efforts, and just, I think having adequate data on some of these newer contaminants that we're beginning to understand, which are already at really bad rates, just, the more that we can both help to collect that data, make sure it's done in a way that it's possible for local groups to be able to help collect that in a way that's usable. And also that maybe for some of these, if there's opportunities, to the extent we have new data outside of some of these longer cycles, like we saw here with Region 7, there might be off-cycle updates that might be able to be included, particularly, like I said, around HABs, which is just relatively newer. And I see that Patrick.
Yeah, our executive director from Region 5 has his hand up. So thank you, board member. Appreciate the good comment. Mr. Paloopa.
I just wanted to thank you for the recognition for our staff efforts, and also to thank some of the Delta groups, SWRCB, Sarah Ryan, and some of the other tribal groups. Even for SWRCB, some of those comments and some of that monitoring was done in 2009, 2011, and we've been having an ongoing discussion about how do we get the data into the right databases so that's assessed in these cycles, and that we can make some meaningful decisions based on that. It's not always the easiest of processes to follow through. It's a massive amount of data. And I just, to the board members' comments, I do want to thank you for the recognition that, staff throughout the regions have been putting into doing that outreach work, to working with citizen scientists to get that information in, and to thank, groups like Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, which also had to learn how to get data in, how to do assessments, how to do management plans that could result in delistings. It's not an easy process. It's a massive amount of data. There's still huge components, even like HABs, it's nutrients, it's temperature, but it's also flow, which, as we've mentioned, isn't quite captured in this massive amount of data that we have out there. So again, my thanks to you for recognizing those outreach efforts. They will continue, to all of your comments. We thank you for that type of discussion here today. There's a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work to do to solve the problems after we get this information all ingested and to move forward with them. That includes, kind of working on management plans, TMDLs, 4B listings, as kind of was mentioned. But I just want to recognize that these efforts will continue to move forward. We've held some tribal summits, Chair Esquivel, to that point, to talk with the tribes about tribal beneficial uses and the type of data that the board needs to make those type of assessments. And oftentimes that's qualitative data as well as quantitative data. That might not be the thing that we square most easily with a 303D listing, but something that we need to ingest as well into our thinking to really come up with ways of protecting these tribal cultural uses and things like that. So that's all I really want to kind of thank you guys for today. Welcome to Board Member Morgan as well. Good to see you up on the virtual dais here today. But thanks so much to everybody for participating in this process. It's a ton of work, as you've seen from all the data that has gone into the system and then has been analyzed.
Really appreciate that, Mr. Kalupa. Yeah, the progress that we see here in our work around the 303D list is years in the making, and really just feel we're at an opportunity to just continue to exponentially drive our ability to ingest data sooner and in more real time, and be reflective of the rapidly changing circumstances I think all of our watersheds are experiencing because of climate change, because of drought, because of floods, because of the shift in the way water is being delivered to California, and ultimately then our need to shift our management of it. And critically, when it's concerned to water quality, knowing again that quality and quantity go hand in hand. So thank you, much appreciated. Other board members, colleagues here, thoughts, reflections, direction when it comes to this 303D list proceeding? And if none, thank you. Appreciate it. Appreciate the incredible and good work again of everyone here in the program. And that wraps up then item number 7 in our workshop and discussion around it. That leaves us actually just with our last item, which is board member reports. As we transition here to item 8, board member reports, again, just welcome, Nicole, board member Morgan here. Just incredibly good to have you here on our first board meeting. I'm hoping that we will be having in-person board meetings here again soon. I think we're waiting for the building to transition to new guidelines when it comes to distancing and masking. And once those are in place, I think we'll be ready to attempt to convene in person, and looking forward to that. It has been, I know, quite the year for all of us. And so just welcome again, board member, really excited to have you join with us. I really don't have actually too much to report on, and just otherwise it's been certainly a lot of conversation around drought, changing conditions, continue to plan for the next year ahead here. And just want to quickly glance and make sure I didn't have anything. Oh, well, I will make sure and flag that last Tuesday, I did have the honor and pleasure of opening our Water Data Science Symposium. It is now our 6th year holding that. And I've been fortunate to be around these last 4 years as that event has evolved. And just want to thank the incredible work of the Office of Information Management Analysis, our folks at the Water Quality Monitoring Council, Nick, our head there, and others that really pulled together an incredible community event, drawing in our partners from the federal and state levels and local to discuss what are the advances that we're seeing in water data science, the growth and the opportunity to continue to become better decision makers collectively as a state and as communities in the face of the climate crisis like drought, and this reconciliation, if you will, that we're having of our inherited systems, these water systems, but also of governance and the way we all view one another in our communities, and acknowledging that here, importantly, our California Native tribes, Native American community has not been treated historically with the respect that we all expect of ourselves in this modern age, and that too has its own impacts and reflection on how we manage water. And so it was a nice opportunity to take a step back, realize that we know now more than we ever have about our watersheds, but the important thing is to turn that into better decisions here amongst us all. So again, really appreciate the opportunity to have addressed the symposium, the opening there, and is really the only significant public event I had these last couple of weeks. So thank you. Other board members, thoughts, reflections, reports?
I don't have any significant events to report, but I just want to
I can
say,
see why, except the big one.
Yeah, just want to say thank you for the very warm welcome. It is just truly an honor to be here.
Thank you, board member.
I have a couple of events, and I'm just trying to get the dates right on my calendar here and not quite getting there. But last week, I attended and presented at the Lodi District Grape Growers Association, a forum on all things water for wine grape growers in the area, and really well attended. And it was a good opportunity for me to receive updates on their groundwater sustainability agencies, and also local regional efforts at diversification of water supply. But the highlight of the day, I think, was just, receiving an update from myself, Michael George, and Jennifer Spalletta on drought. And it was a good opportunity to kind of walk people through things that are yet to come on curtailments in particular. So I really appreciate having been invited, and I'm glad that Michael George was able to join. And then Chair, you and I attended a San Joaquin Valley water roundtable that was hosted by Congressman Costa, Congressman Valadeo, Senator Hurtado, and Borges, and then a number of other elected officials attended as well. And just a good opportunity for information sharing along with the chair and myself. Carla Nemeth was there, Karen Ross, Ernest Conant. And then I think there's another one coming up later this week in the northern part of the San Joaquin Valley that Congressman Josh Harder will be hosting. And then the last thing is just welcome Nicole Morgan, and really excited to have you on board and to get to know you better.
Thank you, Vice Chair.
I don't have too much to report. Actually, no public events in the last couple of weeks. But on this theme, welcome Nicole to the team. We're so happy to have you. And as a fellow engineer, I appreciate, I'm sure, the whirlwind that you've been experiencing over the last couple of weeks here, and well, for a while. It's just the reality of it. But it's really, really great to have you with us. And just, Board Member Doduk was mentioned as well earlier today. So I just wanted to share just an example of her contributions and her stewardship. And so in the form of an event that she organized, I think it was 2 weeks ago or so, and actually she tried to organize this during last year during the COVID pandemic and had to put this off, but she had asked, I think, all of us current board members at the time if we were interested in attending a bat paddle on in the Cosumnes River Preserve to paddle out on a kayak essentially and go to the freeway underpass there and watch all the bats sort of make their nightly awakening and fly out into the night sky in search of food. And so I was able to join, my wife and I were able to join Tam and her group with some folks from Nature Conservancy and others. It was, a fairly small group, but just a remarkable moment just to take time out in the evening of all times and to go out on the kayak, just on the serene, McCollum River, and wait for the bats. And just, be reminded of the environment that we're all blessed with. As altered as it is, there's still a lot of value there, even under freeway underpasses. It's habitat for tens of thousands of bats. And then I think what really stole the show was, the bats were flying out, and that was cool. But then all the hawks came out, and so there were a whole bunch of them, and they were just diving down and swooping and getting their dinner at the same time. So it was just a great opportunity to get out there and have some final words with Tam, and we certainly wish her all the best. I think she's doing a cleanup event here on the American River Parkway in a week or two, and so I'll try to make it out there as well. But we'll miss her. Great to have you, Nicole. Just wanted to share that story with you all.
Thank you so much, board member. And actually, it was before these COVID times of ours that Tam had organized, and we were on the cusp of executing a out of work, but state water board still opportunity and participation in American River Parkway cleanup, and have something of a permanent program and presence there. That's something we will definitely continue to pursue and have. And it will definitely be in great honor of Tam and her tenure here on the board, and commitment to just our institution, and her knowledge of us, her guidance and steady hand as a board member these last 16 years has left us to be just prepared for this continued challenge that we certainly have here at the board. But whether it's the performance program and the metrics that are in there, which were very cutting edge for their time, and still some of the most transparent processes and information around our functioning that I think any agency, certainly of our size, has out there. Whether it's that contribution or just, again, her steady perspective here, will be missed. But very fortunate for having had her tenure here, and now the opportunities that board member Morgan here has to also then contribute to this temporary space we all inhabit, and truly knowing that these are seats that we will hand off to others after us, and know that great care was taken in the seat I was able to come here and inhabit at the public seat. And now our engineer caucus here, reinvigorated by Nicole's presence. So just thank you, board member, for those comments and that story and reflection.
I'll just add my excitement in having you join, board member Morgan, and certainly Tam will be missed, but really extremely excited that you are part of this board and that we get to serve together. Quick updates. Really wanted to just highlight a couple of things. Tomorrow, there's a environmental justice assessment of state agencies briefing that CEHA, the California Environmental Justice Alliance, is hosting from 11 to 1. And I'll say, in the scheme of things, the board scores relatively well, but I think what I find really helpful is the framework that brings, because it's an opportunity to hear from grassroots folks how they see environmental justice within the state agencies' programs, how we might continue to build that in and do more around that, which I just think that a lot of in addition to maybe some specifics, a lot of just the lens that they bring and that framework I find really helpful. In addition to, areas that we may want to improve in. and areas that we're doing well in. So two other just efforts I wanted to highlight and sort of thank staff for their engagement in. One is just following up on that San Joaquin Valley partnership that Vice Chair Diadamo has been helping to lead or spearhead getting that off the ground. And I think, you know, the ability to make sure that staff have, I think Adriana Renteria is going to be or has been joining, and just helping to make sure that we can utilize that opportunity of all of the regional counties, that whole region counties. There's some GSAs, NGOs, service providers, all to figure out how to get be coordinated and most effectively get relief and response for particularly dry well impacts around the drought and assistance. So just appreciate that, and that's continuing. And I think also an area where our staff are developing kind of user-friendly, how do we, you know, is there a hotline to call? How do we make sure that people know what's available and can get routed? And then similarly, there's an effort being led through the U.S. Water Alliance around accelerating consolidations and really seeing California as a leader in that. And I know our staff have been really engaged in that. Obviously, SAFER and all of the work that goes on with that. That's a big focus, but also I think an opportunity to figure out how do we really accelerate these projects, because we can't have them take 6 to 10 years to get done. We really need to see that happen a lot quicker. And there's a lot of challenges to do that. So working through that. I guess the last thing that I'll highlight is just, you know, you may have heard that there was a community, Teviston in Tulare County, that whose single source well went down, and it went down right in the middle of a heat wave. We have many heat waves, unfortunately, this summer. And you know, that area, most residents are on swamp coolers, which rely on water. I'll say when I lived in the Valley, I had a swamp cooler. It's a lot more energy efficient, and you know, there's water challenges with that, but there's also energy challenges when you're using regular air conditioning. So I will just say our staff, I think, I've just gotten feedback from folks throughout how helpful our staff have been in responding to that. You know, utilizing resources to make sure that we can meet the community's needs, make sure water could be coming out of the tap, making sure folks had bottled water, even when the regular water tank response wasn't enough to get all the way to everyone on the system, being able to augment that. So, and also just how much our staff were doing that outside of work hours, responding any time of day or night to try to make sure that and bring that real, genuine human concern to make sure that folks are able to have water in their home, especially in these really, really hot and difficult times. So wanted to just lift up how thankful I am for that, and sort of proud of the work that our agency is doing and that staff have been doing. And then also just recognize that it is not feasible for the 1,500 or so, maybe it's less than that, I can't remember. Michelle Frederick always has the right number, of community water systems that have a single source. And that, I think Teviston is an example. One source goes down for whatever reason, whether it's drought or just mechanical failure, and the community is out of water. And you know, the funding that we have can't cover all of that emergencies that come up, I think, and still have enough to accelerate the kind of long-term solutions that need to take place. So I just really we need to be really leaning into building resiliency before and diversified sources before we're in those states of emergency, because responding after the fact is much more expensive and also just, hazardous to human health, stress, all kinds of things. So thank you. And it was good to see you all, and I hope sometime soon can see you in person.
Thank you, board member. Very much comes to mind that didn't really have the resources prior and waited for systems to fail before really coming to them. And the needs analysis, really identifying at-risk systems, to your point, those with a single source is really helping us at least be better prepared, knowing that it's often though the emergency that precipitates the attention of the state to a community and then starts sometimes just even the planning for what are solutions that are out there that we can get ahead of, to your point. So appreciate the comments. Thank you. Okay, well, I think that wraps up our board member reports and our meeting today, but it doesn't actually wrap up our meeting in total, because we will recess until tomorrow when we will have our racial equity resolution workshop. And so I just really want to encourage everyone, it will start at 4 p.m. so as to be able to accommodate those that have to work during the day, so that we hopefully get some participation from communities themselves to be able to communicate with us their thoughts on our draft resolution and help us understand how best we incorporate racial equity, inclusivity, and diversity within our programs. So just thank you all and look forward to that discussion tomorrow. So we're recessed again until tomorrow at 4 p.m. And until then, just thank you. Have a good afternoon and be well. See you guys then. Take care.